Chapter 451 The Spy in the Sewers. The Zong Consortium was still tightening their encirclement. In the buildings on both sides of the streets, some residents watched silently as Ren Xiaosu flitted past them so quickly they could only see his afterimages. It shocked them when they realized it was just a young man who had turned Stronghold 146 upside down. Could it be that this supernatural being had already surpassed the strength of the Consortium's troops? Gradually, the Zong Consortium's troops set up blockades along several traffic arteries, even mounting heavy machine guns at many key spots. The western part of Stronghold 146 had turned into a cage. Ren Xiaosu narrowed his eyes and sprinted. He tried breaking through two defensive lines of fire, but the problem was that there seemed to be an endless stream of Zong Consortium soldiers remaking the positions. All people would get exhausted no matter what. Even Ren Xiaosu, who had a strong level of fitness, would get tired as well. However, the Zong Consortium's troops were also at a loss. The platoons who had not encountered Ren Xiaosu yet were terrified because they realized most of the troops on the radio that encountered him were dead. Was the enemy really human? But when Ren Xiaosu found himself getting lost on the streets, a manhole cover on the ground was suddenly pushed aside by someone underneath it. Ren Xiaosu found the sight to be extremely familiar. The person in the manhole waved wildly at him. Here, over here. Ren Xiaosu jumped straight down. But the moment he got into the sewers, he grabbed the person by the neck. Who are you? The grip on the man's neck was so strong his face reddened. Boss Luo wanted me to bring you a message. What message? Ren Xiaosu lifted him effortlessly. He said that you had better not die. If you want to die, make sure to leave some black medicine for him. Ren Xiaosu was so annoyed he laughed. Which way do we go? Left, go left. Ren Xiaosu confiscated the person's weapons and went left all the way. It was not that he was returning kindness with enmity, but that he had to be extremely cautious at this moment. Who could know if this fellow was sent by the Zong Consortium to trick him on purpose? The man did not get angry even though he was being carried around like that. Mr. King Zhen told me that you'd definitely come to Stronghold 146 someday. That was why he asked me to help you when I saw you. However, I really did not expect that you would cause such a big commotion. Oh, did I cause a big commotion? Ren Xiaosu said absent-mindedly. Is that not big enough of a commotion? The man said with a wry smile. Currently, the higher-ups of the Zong Consortium living in the stronghold feel unsafe as they're afraid you'll kill them if they drop the guard. Before I came to pick you up, you killed several hundred of the stronghold's garrison troops, didn't you? Even though the buildings provided you with cover as you took on the brigade by yourself, you're still the most fearsome person I've come across in my life. You might as well be called the god of war. Ren Xiaosu's eyebrows twitched. This guy was really good at flattery. However, it seemed that this person also held a rather high position in the Zong Consortium since he knew so much. How else could he be so knowledgeable about the higher-ups? He asked the spy, where does the left lead? We have to get out of their perimeter first. The spy said, I've already prepared a safe house for you where you can wait for things to die down. I don't have time to wait any longer. Ren Xiaosu said, tell me, where are those Zong Consortium higher-ups? The King Consortium spy who was being carried around turned anxious and said, the Zong Consortium's higher-ups. You still think you can kill all of them at this point? There'll be at least half a brigade of soldiers guarding them while the other half tries to capture you. Do you really think you're a god? Kos. Ren Xiaosu fell silent. Noticing no response, the King Consortium spy said with a wry smile, what's more, the Zong Consortium higher-ups are all currently scattered across the stronghold. Once you kill any of them, the entire stronghold's forces will descend upon you again. At that time, I won't be able to get you out of their perimeter again. Mr. King Zhen said I could prioritize my own life over the mission. As Ren Xiaosu listened to him speak, he continued walking without saying a word. Then he asked, which direction leads to the garrison base? The King Consortium spy gasped. Are you thinking of attacking their base while it's empty? What was at the garrison base? There were ammunition depots, and the strategic headquarters was located within it as well. Even if Zongcheng were not there, he could still cause some trouble to the garrison brigade of Stronghold 146 by killing some of their staff officers and commanders. Ren Xiaosu understood this might not be the most important thing he should be doing, but attacking the enemy's weak point was still his best option right now. Who could have thought he would be so bold as to venture into the enemy's garrison base by himself? No matter how brave someone might be, they wouldn't do something like that, right? Ren Xiaosu understood that he might only get a chance if he could create enough chaos to make the Zong Consortium's troops constantly run about. He was running out of time. The Zong Consortium's troops would probably cross the Gobi soon and arrive at Fortress 178. The only way to make Zong Cheng recall them was to hit them hard here. Time waited for no man. However, the spy rambled, even if the base is almost defenseless, there are still at least 500 troops stationed there. If you go, you'll be committing suicide. Which way? Turn right up ahead. Ren Xiaosu took out 6 vials of black medicine and stuffed them into the spy's hands as they walked. He did not have time to repack the black medicine, so he gave them directly to the spy after trading for them in the palace. Thank you, Ren Xiaosu said. The spy said happily, hee, don't mention it. Put me down after we get up close. I know how to find my way back. With the black medicine in hand, Boss Luo would definitely reward him handsomely when he got back to the King Consortium. He would have almost nothing to worry about for the rest of his life. Putting everything else aside, Mr. King Zhen and Boss Luo would never treat their loyal servants badly. Ren Xiaosu thanked the spy as he had risked his life to rescue him. This was despite the fact that he had not used his trump card yet, and it would still prove very difficult for the Zong Consortium brigade to encircle and trap him. But if he sustained an injury while breaking through the encirclement, and if the enemy used hounds to chase after him, that would only make his next plans harder to carry out. Moreover, the spy had taken a great risk in the circumstances. Since the spy was willing to risk his life to rescue him, he would bear it in mind. After walking for a dozen kilometers and taking many turns, the spy said with great familiarity, "Here we are, the Zong Consortium's garrison base is right in front of us. Although the sewers also pass underneath the base, the center is reinforced with rebar grates, and there's no way to get through them. You'll have to figure out how to get in yourself." Ren Xiaosu nodded and finally put him back on the ground. "Go back and tell Fatty Luo and King Zhen that I'll repay them in the future." As of today, the brothers no longer owed him any more favors. Instead, it was Ren Xiaosu who owed King Zhen and Luo Lan a great big favor. Whether it be the help the King Consortium gave to capture the Beiwen River, or the spy they sent who risked his life to assist him, Ren Xiaosu could no longer ignore these two brothers. A moment later, the spy saw Ren Xiaosu draw a black saber out of thin air. He started slashing, and he cut through the rebar grating in front of him like it was paper. The King Consortium spy's jaw dropped. So it turned out the area he couldn't get into was no obstacle for Ren Xiaosu at all. Come to think of it, he was someone who fucking dared to take on a brigade by himself. Before Ren Xiaosu proceeded any further, he looked back at the spy and asked, "Friend, what's your name?" "Zheng Yuandong," the spy said. "I'll remember you." Then Ren Xiaosu turned around and walked into the darkness. 452 strategies revealed. The Zong Consortium's troops were double-timing it deep in the Gobi. They had already charted out this route and knew there was an oasis that could even allow their mechanized infantry to travel through. If not for this route, they would only be able to launch a surprise attack with their infantry. However, that strategy would be significantly less effective. Before the cataclysm, it seemed that this path used to be a forest. No one knew who it was who planted so many trees here that it created oases, but it eventually helped to create some form of life out here. However, it started turning back into a wasteland after many years of neglect. Actually, not many people cared whether this place would revert back into a desert. More importantly, this disappearing oasis had presented the Zong Consortium with a final opportunity to achieve their ambitions. The Zong Consortium's higher-ups termed this, Heaven's Route, as it was an opportunity given by the heavens for them to usurp Fortress 178. The Zong Consortium had not been preparing for nothing over the past few years. If they did not have a contingency plan like this, they would not have dared to poke at Fortress 178 so much in recent years. "We'll arrive at South Lake soon. After we pass there, we'll stop for a 2-hour reorganization before heading straight for Fortress 178. The Zong Consortium's general said delightedly to his deputy commander next to him, In this war, we'll be the ones to get recognized for our outstanding contributions. Without our painstaking planning all these years, and our crossing of the Gobi to deal a fatal blow to Fortress 178, we probably only have a very slim chance of winning. Sir, you really are wise, the adjutant laughed reservedly. When he laughed, he ended up eating a mouthful of sand. They had been traveling in the Gobi for several days already. Even with the cover of the oasis that was disappearing, it was still a very tough journey to make. But no matter how much they were suffering in these moments, it would still be worth it. They would definitely go down in the annals of history. The Zong Consortium's general said in high spirits, "This battle will be a good opportunity for us to make a name for ourselves." As the mechanized infantry in the rear continued to roll over the hard ground, it swept up a large cloud of sand and dust in the desert. When the Zong Consortium's general listened to the sound of the armored vehicles moving across the gravel road, he found it extremely sonorous and pleasant. He asked his adjutant, "Notice anything unusual? This is a critical period, so we have to be even more careful." "Don't worry," the adjutant said, "we've become so familiar with this place over the years, and Fortress 178 doesn't have any military facilities in the Gobi at all, so how would those damn fucks know we are?" But a moment later, they heard an ear-piercing noise approach them. These combat troops were the Zong Consortium's most elite fighting force, and the soldiers were the highest quality in the military. So when the ear-piercing noise screeched, all of them were horrified. It was the sound of missiles flying through the air and heading towards them. "We're under attack! We're under attack!" A few loud explosions boomed as several missiles landed on their column. Suddenly, the Zong Consortium's troops were enveloped in a large cloud of dust and smoke. The Zong Consortium's general was already prone. He did not understand why a group of soldiers from Fortress 178 was lying in ambush here. As he lay on the ground, he had a quick look around at his surroundings. When the dust and smoke dissipated slightly, he saw black dots appearing on the horizon in 3 directions. Fortress 178 had come prepared. The Zong Consortium's general was surprised when he realized they had actually walked right into Fortress 178's trap that wrapped them up into a bag. The incoming mechanized infantry of Fortress 178 swept up a huge cloud of smoke and dust on the road. The Zong Consortium's general immediately ordered his troops to launch a counterattack. But when an artillery shell flew towards their enemy, a black cauldron suddenly appeared in front of the targeted troops and blocked it. However, that huge black cauldron did not stay put there. It flew around in the air and blocked another 5 or 6 artillery shells in succession. It was very difficult to even catch a glimpse of a flying missile with the naked eye, yet all of the artillery shells were blocked one after another. When the artillery shells impacted against the black cauldron, they exploded. Once the wind blew, the grey smoke from the explosion dissipated immediately. Many of the Zong Consortium's soldiers were stunned. What the fuck was that? Zhu Xianchu. The Zong Consortium's general was bewildered. How can Zhu Xianchu possibly be here? Isn't he at the rear of our Zong territory? Didn't someone report that they spotted his shadow back there? Someone in the Zong Consortium headquarters had mentioned this. They said that Zhu Xianchu had disappeared from the battlefield, and it seemed like Zhang Jinglan had made some other arrangements for him. It was likely that Zhang Jinglan had seen through their intentions and sent Zhu Xianchu to stop their advance through the Gobi. But when someone suddenly relayed some new intel with claims that Zhu Xianchu was seen with that company in their rear displaying his superpower, they were relieved. But the Zong Consortium general in the Gobi could never have expected that Zhu Xianchu would suddenly appear in front of him like magic. Did this Zhu Xianchu know how to fly? At the same time, Zhu Xianchu, who had just blocked the artillery shells from landing, was clamoring for war at the rear of the troops. Attack without mercy and surround them from 3 directions. We may let this Zong general slip away, but their troops must be destroyed here in the Gobi. Charge! When the soldiers of Fortress 178 witnessed for themselves that their commanding officer could even block artillery shells, their morale gained a huge boost. However, Zhu Xianchu was just putting on a brave front at this moment and doing his best to hold on. It was obvious that he was experiencing pain all over his body from the backlash transmitted by the Black Cauldron. In fact, it was nearly not tough enough to withstand the force of the artillery bombardment. but he knew well that whether Stronghold 178 could win the war all depended on whether his army could score a beautiful and resounding victory here. Zhu Xianchu had been lying in ambush here for nearly a month now, and all of the men from Fortress 178 were stretched to their limits. However, was Fortress 178 able to stand intact in the northwest for so long because of how well equipped they were? No, so was it because one of their troops was worth 100 of the enemy's? It was not that either. It was because they could endure hardships more than any other troops in the world. It was because they treated hardship as a routine while living in the harsh northwestern frontier. This was going to be a vicious battle where their final strategies were revealed. Zhang Jingdelin just received news from Zhu Xianchu's troops that they were exchanging fire with the enemy. Because of the surprise, the ambush troops of Fortress 178 had gained the upper hand. Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jingdelin. Will Ren Xiaosu blame us? It was obvious what Wang Fengyuan was getting at. Actually, with this contingency plan, the Zong Consortium's trump card would be easily staved off as long as they stepped into the trap Fortress 178 had set up. Once that happened, Fortress 178 would no longer be in an as perilous situation as they were expecting. There hadn't actually been a need for Ren Xiaosu to head to Stronghold 146 at all. When Zhang Xiaoman called them the other day, Ren Xiaosu had volunteered to head to Stronghold 146 to take out their board members. Zhang Jingdelin had wanted to stop him, but he could not reveal his plan. Back then, Zhang Jingdelin and Wang Fengyuan were thoroughly investigating the issue of the spy. Even though they knew there was a spy among the commanders, they did not manage to discover who it was. So to ensure their plans would not be leaked to the Zong Consortium, Zhang Jingdelin could not talk about their plans to the razor-sharp company at that time. During that call, any details that were brought up could easily get caught by the spy. As such, Zhang Jingdelin decided he could not let the soldiers of Fortress 178 bear such a risk. 453 A potential estrangement. Earlier, more than a dozen units of Fortress 178's fighting forces had secretly left the forward operating base. For example, Zhou Yinglong had instructed the razor-sharp company to launch an attack on the Beiwen River on the pretense of heading out for the cross-country training. Then they never returned to base again. Likewise, the independent regiment Zhu Xianchu was previously in was deployed to the western side of Blackstone River. The deployment of these troops was actually to make it difficult for the spy to figure out the situation. Once these troops left the forward operating base, all communications with them would be handled personally by Wang Fengyuan. Furthermore, Zhang Jingdelin had stopped eating for 2 days and lost quite a bit of weight in order to deceive the spy as well. It was also at this time that they locked onto Li Xiang as a suspect. When Li Xiang went to eat, he would pretend to casually ask Lin Yus, the manager of the Chow Hall, how has the commander's appetite been recently? As an infantry brigade commander, Li Xiang was not authorized to participate in the drafting of battle plans. So he could only use Zhang Jingdelin's appetite to gauge whether Fortress 178 had any contingency plans. This was because it was known to everyone in Fortress 178 that Commander Zhang's appetite would drop whenever he was troubled. If the spy were not caught, that plan could only remain hidden in his head. But Zhang Jingdelin knew that if he did not reveal his plan, he would not be able to stop Ren Xiaosu. By the time the spy was caught, Ren Xiaosu had already split from the razor-sharp company and could no longer be contacted. Therefore, Wang Fengyuan immediately consulted with Zhang Jingdelin on Ren Xiaosu after they caught the spy. But it was too late by then. Zhang Jingdelin could only hope that Ren Xiaosu would survive by himself. Wang Fengyuan whispered, fortunately, he got the razor-sharp company somewhere safe. Otherwise, this would have weighed on my conscience for the rest of my life if those glorious troops had gotten wiped out. That was expected of him, Zhang Jingdelin said calmly. Zhang Jingdelin knew this deep down. The moment Ren Xiaosu decided to head to Stronghold 146, he would definitely have arranged for the razor-sharp company to be placed somewhere safe. This was just like how the young man had arranged for Li Xiaoyu and Yan Luyuan to stay at the town school back then. Zhang Jingdelin understood this young man very well. Just as expected, Ren Xiaosu went to Stronghold 146 alone. Meanwhile, Wang Fengyuan had received reliable intel from their spy hiding in a residential building that the garrison troops of Stronghold 146 were conducting a citywide search for Ren Xiaosu. However, Ren Xiaosu had fought his way out of the predicament and was nowhere to be found. Zhang Jinglan looked at Wang Fengyuan and said calmly, "Even if he blames me, I'll still accept it. I have my duty to uphold, so I can't be indecisive." Zhang Jinglan had a clear picture of what his priorities were when it came down to Ren Xiaosu and everyone else at Fortress 178. Wang Fengyuan was stunned. He was worried if this would estrange the young man from Fortress 178. When Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jinglan, he realized he was not as calm as he had claimed. It was just that he was pretending to fool the spy. Now, he was really worried. The battle in the Gobi did not end that quickly. The Zong Consortium troops who were tasked with crossing the Gobi were extremely tough soldiers. Even though they had been ambushed, they were still able to immediately form a strong defensive line to fight back and retreat at the same time. This mission was the Zong Consortium's entire hope for the war. Therefore, every soldier here not only had to go through a strict political assessment but also undergo extremely tough military training as well. But Zhu Xianchu was not surprised by that as he already knew what kinds of troops he would be facing. Actually, there were still some flaws with Fortress 178's plans. For example, would the absence of a key supernatural being from the main battlefield like Zhu Xianchu impact their plans negatively? However, Zhang Jinglan was left with no other choice. Zhu Xianchu's mastery of command in small-scale military operations, as well as the application of his superpower in a small-scale engagement's attack and defense, were outstanding. Therefore, Zhu Xianchu was definitely the best candidate to command the ambush troops in the Gobi. But what Zhang Jinglan and Zhu Xianchu had not expected was how Ren Xiaosu had helped to plug that gap. Of course, it remained to be seen whether Zhu Xianchu would feel grateful to Ren Xiaosu after he found out. The battle in the Gobi continued. The Zong Consortium had waited too long for this day, and so had Zhang Jinglan. But if the Zong Consortium was staking everything on the Gobi mission as their final resort to turn the tables, it could only be said that they had made the wrong decision. Actually, Fortress 178 had already gotten closer to winning the war now that it had progressed to here. After Zhang Jinglan's plan to catch the Zong Consortium in their own trap was completed, Fortress 178 suddenly made significant progress in the battle at Mount Wuchuan. When they were previously trying to capture the summits, Fortress 178 had faced tough battles. At that time, the Zong Consortium generals were even thinking that Fortress 178's troops did not seem so tough after all. Actually, Fortress 178's weapons and equipment were not as good as what the Zong Consortium had. Moreover, the Zong Consortium outnumbered Fortress 178 by more than 2 to 1. However, the Zong Consortium generals consciously chose to ignore those conditions and felt that as long as they could defeat Fortress 178, it would show that they were more powerful than them. But in that raging storm of a battle, the Zong Consortium suddenly realized the Fortress 178 troops were seemingly undefeatable. No matter how many troops they piled on them, Fortress 178's soldiers who were stretched to their limits were still able to go a little further. Even though some of the positions had changed hands many times, the actual duration it took Fortress 178 to win back a position was only 2 to 4 hours. Meanwhile, it might take up to a full day and night for the Zong Consortium to win it back from Fortress 178. There were clearly far fewer Fortress 178 troops on the battlefield, but even when the Zong Consortium troops barely managed to win back a position, they would find some of the enemy soldiers pretending to be dead while clutching explosives in their arms just so they could perish together with the Zong Consortium soldiers. This kind of war with no end in sight was like fighting an enemy that could never be defeated. Just the thought of it would terrify anyone. After the successful ambush of the Zong Consortium troops in the Gobi, Zhang Jinglan immediately ordered the mechanized infantry that were reorganizing themselves to fully deploy onto the battlefield. Zhou Yinglong had fought hard to open up safe passage for them to proceed. These mechanized infantry would deal the Zong Consortium troops a fatal blow. It would be the straw that broke the camel's back. And surprising many people, the pontoon bridge on the Blackstone River had been rebuilt in just 3 days. Originally, they had estimated it would take 15 days before the mechanized infantry could cross again. When Zhou Yinglong went for a break in the rear, he even fell asleep on his meal tray while eating. The medics in the rear quickly carried him away. After cutting open his uniform with scissors, they realized the newly promoted brigade commander had sustained tiny wounds all over his body. There were 2 pieces of shrapnel stuck in his thigh that weren't removed until now. The nurse cleaning his wounds was shocked when she saw his injuries. There was another nurse working in the temporary medical center who was the wife of one of the troops. She looked at her husband's wounds and scolded him tearfully for being careless while bandaging it. The soldier said impatiently, "Can't you stop crying? I have to rejoin my squad after you're done bandaging my wounds. We're the ones who took those positions. Now that we're close to victory, I can't let those little bastards claim all the credit." "Get lost then, go claim your credit. I'll settle the score with you when we get home." After the nurse tied a bow knot to finish off the bandage, she chased her husband off tearfully. Chapter 454 I Can't Say. Some of the commanders who had already returned from the front line were discussing the battle that took place in the Gobi. This was something they were not even aware of previously. Back then, some of them had realized Zhu Xianchu had gone missing. But with nearly 100,000 troops deployed all over the battlefield, and Zhang Jinglan splitting up more than a dozen units to various locations to mislead the enemy, everyone did not think much of it at the time. It wasn't until today that they realized Zhu Xianchu had been sent to the Gobi to the northwest. At this moment, Wang Fengyuan came into the chow hall with his meal tray. Lin Yuz, the manager of the chow hall, asked proudly while serving him, "How was my acting?" "It was perfect." Wang Fengyuan laughed heartily. "The commander told me it was all thanks to you that we caught Li Xiang this time." Hee. I've been paying close attention since that bastard sneakily asked me about the commander's appetite. Lin Yu said as he scooped up a large ladle of meat for Wang Fengyuan, but still, it was all thanks to your subsequent actions. Otherwise, we could only have remained suspicious of that person. There's no need to be humble. Wang Fengyuan shook his head. After all, we only knew who to investigate after he displayed some unusual behavior. At this moment, a large group of commanders gathered around Wang Fengyuan. "You asshole, you must have known about the commander's plan from the start, right? Why were you so tight-lipped? You didn't tell us anything at all." Wang Fengyuan snapped, "What if any of you turned out to be spies? Even now, I still suspect there's a spy among you people." The commanders around him got annoyed for a while, but as they were used to Wang Fengyuan's manner of speaking, they never took it personally since a long time ago. When Wang Fengyuan was flushing out the spy, his methods were brutal and he did not give a damn about anyone. He was only answerable to Zhang Jinglan. Even back at Fortress 178, Wang Fengyuan lived in seclusion every day and never had a drop of alcohol. Wang Fengyuan used to have a wife, but there was one night when she overheard him talking in his sleep. It turned out Wang Fengyuan was also a very ruthless person. He actually separated from his wife right after that and only occasionally visited his child during the day. At that time, Wang Fengyuan's child just got born. Whenever he went to visit his child after that, the child would only address him as uncle. However, Wang Fengyuan never once complained no matter how unbearable it felt and spent his life in seclusion for over a decade. When his subordinates sometimes saw Wang Fengyuan smoking alone outside the office, they always felt that he had a lot of things weighing on his mind. Next to him, Chai Zhilong, who was the commander of an infantry brigade, asked, "Fengyuan, since it's no longer a secret, why don't you share with us what happened? We were all worried when Commander Zhang stopped eating for 2 days." Wang Fengyuan smiled ambiguously at them. "I think there's no harm in sharing it with y'all now since the commander's given me permission to talk about it." Sharing their victorious exploits at this moment would surely boost the morale of the troops. When someone heard that Wang Fengyuan was willing to share, they said excitedly, "Tell us, did the commander really go hungry for 2 days? Didn't y'all have Lin Yu serve him some food secretly?" Wang Fengyuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect this group of people to actually be concerned about this matter instead. He said, "Who said that the commander's appetite gets affected whenever he's troubled?" The commanders looked at one another. "That's not true." Wang Fengyuan smiled. The other commanders suddenly realized the rumor was a trap. For example, by letting an opponent think that you had the habit of touching your nose when you were bluffing in 3-card brag, you could fake a tell to lure your opponent into a trap and deal them the fatal blow. Of course, that was only the most basic example. The rumors of Zhang Jinglan having no appetite whenever he was troubled had been circulating in the stronghold for nearly 20 years. However, that was proven to be false today. Wang Fengyuan said, when the commander is really troubled, he'll smoke more than 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That much is true. However, Chai Zhilong, who was next to him, pointed at Wang Fengyuan and chided him jokingly, "You're fucking laying a trap for us, right? When I was serving as an orderly for the commander, he could also smoke 2 packs of cigarettes if he was in a good mood." Wang Fengyuan raised his eyebrows. "You've revealed the commander's personal habits without permission. Go and pen a 3,000-word-long apology letter." Chai Zhilong's expression immediately changed. "But I never said anything." Wang Fengyuan ignored his protest. Rules were rules. Chai Zhilong pulled a long face. Reveling in schadenfreude, someone patted Chai Zhilong on the shoulder, then turned to ask Wang Fengyuan, "Tell us then, how did Commander Zhang discover that the Zong Consortium was planning to use the Gobi to get to Fortress 178? Hasn't Commander Zhang been away from the fortress for more than a decade? Didn't he only just return? Besides, no one at Fortress 178 has mentioned something like that before." Wang Fengyuan sneered. "The plan itself was given to the Zong Consortium by Commander Zhang several years ago. When the Zong Consortium began provoking us more frequently, Commander Zhang guessed their FOB in the Gobi had most likely finished construction. That was when he decided to come back. The commanders realized Commander Zhang had not been idle outside either. Everyone turned the gaze to Wang Fengyuan again. So it turned out Wang Fengyuan must have been keeping in touch with Commander Zhang ever since he secretly left Fortress 178. However, this bastard was so tight-lipped the others were totally unaware. "Bastard, I didn't expect you to be so good at bluffing when you're so terrible at intelligence gathering," Chai Zhilong muttered. Chai Zhilong stunned himself. Wait a minute. Wang Fengyuan had been the intelligence director for over a decade now and was always complaining to others about how difficult it was to gather intelligence. Although he also started making some progress in recent years, no one knew exactly what progress he had made. Everyone would always make fun of Wang Fengyuan in private, saying the intelligence agency of Fortress 178 was where one waited for retirement. But today, it seemed that Wang Fengyuan and Commander Zhang were really the prescient people. If Wang Fengyuan was not capable, wouldn't Commander Zhang have removed him from his post long ago? How could Commander Zhang be so careless in his duties? When they thought of this, everyone started seeing Wang Fengyuan in a different light. So it seemed that even the Zong Consortium's plan to cross the Gobi was leaked by Zhang Jinglan to them. Could it be that Commander Zhang had intended to destroy the Zong Consortium for a long, long time? But Commander Zhang had still not returned to Fortress 178 at that time, right? So was Wang Fengyuan responsible for all this? When did that happen? Someone asked. Wang Fengyuan thought back and replied, "I don't remember." The commanders around him scowled. "As if you would fucking forget. Like hell we'd believe that." But then a commander asked about something unrelated. "Fengyuan, you must have known there was someone like Ren Xiaosu, right? Tell us more." Wang Fengyuan thought for a moment. "I still can't talk about it." "Is it because he's not gotten out of danger yet? I heard he went to Stronghold 146 by himself." "Is it true?" Chai Zhilong asked. Yes, Wang Fengyuan did not hide this from them. After all, the Zong Consortium knew about this as well. Chai Zhilong muttered, "That kid is way too fierce. He even dares to go to Stronghold 146 by himself. Then what's he doing now? Did you get our agent in the north to give him some help?" Wang Fengyuan shook his head. "I can't say. He had already said all that he could say. The rest of the information would have to be kept secret." The commanders around Wang Fengyuan dispersed. They also needed to reorganize themselves as quickly as possible since they were still required to fight on the northern front. After all, even though they were close to victory today, they still had not captured any of the Zong Consortium's strongholds. Chapter 455 Sneaking into the Zong Consortium's military base. As Fortress 178's troops emerged victorious at the front lines, Ren Xiaosu, who was moving through the sewers, had finished cutting through the rebar grating in front of him. He was quietly infiltrating deep into Garrison 146's military base. Every time he passed by a manhole cover, he would listen carefully for any movements overhead. Ren Xiaosu could clearly hear footfalls above him as Zong Consortium soldiers walked around in their hard-soled boots. Since he could not just climb up there, he could only estimate the number of garrison troops remaining in the base based on the movements above his head. He needed to do this so he could find a good opportunity to take action. Through his careful observation, Ren Xiaosu realized the soldiers here still maintained an extremely strict patrolling routine even when the rest of the troops were conducting a citywide search for him. Approximately every 5 minutes or so, a platoon would walk past overhead. The margin of error in their timing did not exceed 10 seconds. Sometimes, light from spotlights outside would seep in through the 2 holes on the manhole cover and illuminate Ren Xiaosu's face. Ren Xiaosu cautiously found a manhole cover where the patrols seldom passed by and got a bold idea. The manhole cover above his head was welded shut, leaving only 2 holes for drainage purposes. If it were anyone else who had infiltrated into this place, they would definitely be driven to despair. It was no wonder the King Consortium spy from earlier had not even thought about infiltrating the military base through the sewer system. Fatty Luo's trusted method for escape and concealment back at the Li Consortium did not seem like it would work in this military base. But not even this was enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. He did possess the black saber, after all. It was precisely because the defense here was the tightest that he chose to break in from here to get above ground. This was because even the Zong Consortium's soldiers would not expect someone to break in quietly through the manhole covers since they were welded shut, especially when the sewer system was reinforced with rebar grating. Ren Xiaosu started to slowly and effortlessly cut open the manhole cover with his black saber. Then he waited in silence. Suddenly, he heard footsteps slowly approaching the manhole cover he was under. When the enemy passed by, Ren Xiaosu flipped open the manhole cover quietly and leaped out. He pounced onto the enemy like a cheetah. Before the spotlights could sweep across again, he had already broken the neck of his enemy and dragged the corpse into the sewers, closing the manhole cover after him. His shadow clone had assisted him throughout the entire process. After the manhole cover was closed, it went all quiet again above ground as though nothing had happened. Ren Xiaosu had a quick look at his surroundings when he was above ground just now. His current position was at the edge of the base. Most of the buildings here consisted of 1-story barracks, but there was a narrow 5-story tower that stood out from among the structures. Could that be the administrative building of the garrison troops' headquarters? Ren Xiaosu mentally estimated that he was around 200 meters away from the tower. Ren Xiaosu made a decision. Although he had not yet seen where the ammunition depots of Garrison 146 were, he knew he should set his sights on that narrow tower if he wanted to destroy the central command of these troops. Right now, Ren Xiaosu needed to get a change of clothes. Only by changing into the Zong Consortium's khaki uniform could he minimize his chances of being suspected. Even if it could make the enemy hesitate for only 0.1 seconds, that would still be worth it. Sometimes, that 0.1 second reaction time could determine the difference between life and death. He quickly took the uniform off of the Zong Consortium soldier he had just killed and happily prepared to change into it. He did not even use the black saber earlier because he was worried the clothes would get stained with blood. But Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Not for any other reason but because he realized the enemy was a little too short and his uniform was too small. Ren Xiaosu was 18 years old and a supernatural being as well. He had grown from his original height of 178 centimeters at the age of 17 to 184 centimeters. This was considered very tall even among males, especially in an era where malnutrition was prevalent. This meant it might not be easy to find the right size of uniform. But Ren Xiaosu was not someone who was easily discouraged. Since the plan was still feasible, he would have to find a way to execute it no matter what. However, he would have to act quickly. Once the Zong Consortium discovered that a soldier had gone missing, his plan would have more or less failed. When he grabbed a second Zong Consortium soldier, Ren Xiaosu frowned again and let out a sigh. No, this soldier is still too short. And the third soldier Ren Xiaosu grabbed, no. This one's too big. This soldier's uniform made Ren Xiaosu look like he had put on a costume. Although Ren Xiaosu was built, His physique was still thin because his strength and agility were evenly balanced. Ren Xiaosu was not expecting much anymore, but when he caught the fourth person, he saw a glimmer of hope in his plan. The size of this person is just right this time. Phew! Ren Xiaosu finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was worried he would end up capturing and bringing all of the soldiers in this base down into the sewers he was hiding in. But at this moment, an alarm blared in the garrison base. It seemed the missing personnel had already attracted the attention of the Zong Consortium garrison troops. Ren Xiaosu quickly got changed and took the soldier's access card before climbing out of the sewers. Then he walked to the tower as casually as he could. The patrolling platoons that were on rotational break quickly reassembled at the barracks. Immediately, an even more rigorous search team armed with live ammunition was formed. Troops were relaying the orders as they passed each other. We have some soldiers who went missing. Search every corner of the base immediately. Conduct a blanket search and follow up on any tracks that are found. The enemy might have already infiltrated our base. Ren Xiaosu felt these Zong Consortium troops were really quite alert. But it was not a big problem as he had already gone into the tower he identified earlier. The tower was illuminated with incandescent white lights inside. When Ren Xiaosu was about to swipe his access card to pass through the security entrance, the guard outside eyed him suspiciously as though he found this person a little unfamiliar. Sir, please show me your ID. Ren Xiaosu tried to bluff his way through. He looked at the guard and said calmly, "You don't know me. Can you say you recognize every soldier in the base?" The guard replied earnestly, "Well, sir, it's true that I can't recognize every soldier in our brigade, but I can still recognize the regimental commanders when there's so few of them." Ren Xiaosu was slightly taken aback. Did he kill yet another regimental commander? He had not even gone through boot camp before, so how could he know how to recognize the Zong Consortium's military ranks? Moreover, the regimental commander he killed was also wearing a standard combat uniform like the rest of the soldiers. It was just that there was a slightly different insignia on his collar. So he thought it was just an ordinary officer like a platoon commander or a non-commissioned officer with an appointment. However, he did not expect it to be a regimental commander. A second later, Ren Xiaosu gave a mental sigh. For such tightly guarded places, it seemed it would really be impossible to sneak past the defenses. It was not that his plan was unfeasible but that the enemy's security was too tight. Since he could not sneak in, he would just have to kill his way in. Ren Xiaosu suddenly made his move. Before the guard could react, Ren Xiaosu landed a knife-hand strike onto his opponent's neck. The strike whooshed through the air. The guard collapsed onto the ground lifelessly. Ren Xiaosu looked up at the surveillance camera and knew that from this moment on, the soldiers in the entire base would start pursuing him with all their might. But before that happened, Ren Xiaosu would first cripple the military's central command in this tower. He would rather face a defenseless base than head out to the stronghold to face the massive search force. He was only hoping that his arrival would send Stronghold 146 spiraling into chaos. Only amid the chaos would he have a glimmer of hope to clinch victory. Chapter 456 Breakthrough. The alarm in Garrison 146's military base was getting more and more deafening. It even got to the point where almost half of the stronghold could hear it now. When the residents furtively opened their windows and looked out towards the base, they heard the heavy footsteps of soldiers running around. The troops that were originally searching for Ren Xiaosu in the stronghold were rushing back towards the base. Some residents were bewildered by this. When they heard during the day that the Zong Consortium troops had been unable to capture the young man who had broken into the stronghold, everyone found it unbelievable. After all, there was an entire formation of Zong Consortium troops stationed here, while the other party was only a single person. Yet they couldn't even capture him. At that time, the person who brought up the matter said, "My brother-in-law is a regimental commander in the Garrison 146 troops. He was the one who told me about it." However, many of those he told did not believe it and felt he was just bragging. They said that if his brother-in-law were a regimental commander, then their father would be the brigade commander. After all, the situation was so chaotic that everyone was getting extremely unsettled, and it felt like the war was starting to affect the people in Stronghold 146. As such, no one really took that young man's words seriously. After all, who would believe that a brigade could not even deal with a lone enemy who had entered the stronghold? But at this moment, they were finally a little convinced after hearing the ear-piercing alarm. The young man had not only escaped the pursuit of the garrison troops in the daytime, he was even bold enough to attack the base of the Zong Consortium's garrison. After Ren Xiaosu killed the guard at the entrance, he immediately headed upstairs armed with his black saber. When someone saw him kill the guard through the surveillance camera, they rushed down. The alarm in the tower blared as well. All of a sudden, a commotion broke out in the administrative building. Two of the soldiers who rushed down had the guards up in the stairway. They had seen clearly through the surveillance camera how unbelievably skilled the enemy was. When the enemy took out the guard earlier, he even smashed the brick wall beside him at the same time. But before they could even come face to face with Ren Xiaosu, they saw a hand reach out of a shadow cast by the stairway's handrail. It then dropped a grenade at their feet. An explosion blasted in the tower. Ren Xiaosu did not have time to tussle with these Zong Consortium soldiers who were hiding in the shadows and trying to shoot him. It would be too troublesome if the enemy's troops managed to group up and surround the tower. The troops in the tower all rushed down, with some of them adopting a defensive formation in the stairways and corners while they waited quietly for Ren Xiaosu to show up. However, this method would only be effective when dealing with normal enemies. Against Ren Xiaosu, that was too passive a tactic. Ren Xiaosu was rapidly taking down the enemy troops one by one. The soldier in the control room who was in charge of monitoring and reporting Ren Xiaosu's movements could only watch as he ran through the corridors like a ghostly presence, and his every move was also ferocious like a beast. Through the surveillance feed, he watched an officer rush out of a room holding a pistol. But the moment he stepped out of the room, a black saber slashed onto his shoulder and his arm fell onto the ground together with the gun. Right after, the young man kicked the officer so forcefully his entire body was mangled. How much strength would he need to be able to do that? The bones in a human body were extremely tough. As grenades exploded one after another, the soldier in the control room saw the security monitors turning black one by one. However, he could do nothing to stop the young man's advance. Every few seconds, a security monitor would either go black or turn into static. The soldier in the control room suddenly felt like he was watching a paranormal movie. Such scenes would usually take place right before the appearance of a ghost as it slowly wrung the fear out of its victim's heart until it bled. Earlier in the day, this soldier had heard about how his fellow comrades of the search party were unable to apprehend the wanted criminal. When everyone was eating in the chow hall, they even made fun of their comrades outside the base for being too weak and unable to capture a single person. But when he saw with his own eyes how fearsome the enemy was, he understood what havoc a person like him could cause in the stronghold city by relying on the blind spots the buildings provided. Without intense firepower suppressing him, no one could do anything. This young man was practically invincible in the smaller battles, so it required the deployment of a much larger force to kill him. Wait a minute, the enemy had already moved too. The soldier in the control room was startled. He picked up his gun and looked behind him only to see the locked door of the control room being slashed open right at this moment. That black saber left a terrifying crack in the steel door, and the soldier inside was met by Ren Xiaosu's cold stare through it. He was so nervous with keeping his eye on the security monitors that he forgot the enemy had already arrived at the control room's doorstep. The soldier was scared out of his wits even though he only saw part of the enemy's face through the crack. After slashing through the closed steel door, Ren Xiaosu did not even bother to enter when he saw there was only one person inside. He just threw a grenade in through the crack before he continued moving forward. Ren Xiaosu used to use the grenades sparingly as he had very few of them on hand. But when he led the razor-sharp company to destroy 3 military factories some time ago, they seized so many grenades it was unimaginable for Ren Xiaosu. Right now, even he was unsure of how many grenades he had exactly. No one from the razor-sharp company would fight Ren Xiaosu for the grenades. They just handed all the grenades they found over to Ren Xiaosu. At this moment, the battle at Mount Wuchuan had benefited Ren Xiaosu's cause as the number of troops in garrison 146 had decreased by several times after their soldiers were deployed to the front lines. There were usually 2 supernatural beings stationed at the garrison base as well. However, only one remained at this moment, and that supernatural being was none other than Zong Cheng himself. It was just that no one knew where he was right now. So Ren Xiaosu did not encounter any particularly effective resistance as he made his way upstairs in a killing spree. After all, he could casually drop grenades anywhere in the building as he wished while the enemy had to be cautious. There was a large amount of information stored here, and many of those who were in the building were the Zong Consortium's own people. As such, they still harbored fantasies that as long as one of them could gun down Ren Xiaosu, he would definitely be done for. But none of them managed to hit Ren Xiaosu, and most of them died before they could even see him. Besides, half of those in the administrative building were clerical staff officers, while the remaining half consisted of officers equipped with pistols and some normal garrison troops. As soldiers guarding a place like this, the garrison troops were not equipped with grenades at all. Blood was flowing down the stairway and trickling onto the next level with audible dripping sounds. After Ren Xiaosu rushed up to the third story, a person stealthily climbed out of a closet in an office on the second story. He did not even have the courage to put up a fight just now. At this moment, he realized he might still have a chance to escape. The explosions had already moved onto the upper floors. The chubby officer finally managed to get out of the closet after some struggling. But when he walked to the corridor, he suddenly slipped and fell heavily onto the ground. Due to the sticky blood that was flowing on the ground, the floor was very difficult to walk on. If one could not find their balance, they would surely slip and fall. When the chubby officer landed on the ground, he let out a cry in pain. But he regretted it immediately as he wondered if that would have attracted the enemy's attention. But the enemy was already upstairs, surely he wouldn't turn back to kill him, right? But before he could stop worrying, he suddenly saw someone throw a grenade out of a shadow next to him. Chapter 457 Restoring the Armor. Silence fell over the administrative building. As Ren Xiaosu strolled through the blood-soaked environment, the enemies in the building had apparently all died. Only the sound of blood flowing could be heard in the background. While he walked up the stairway to the fourth story, Ren Xiaosu realized he encountered almost no resistance. He felt that this was a little odd. He found a locked door between the third and fourth stories, and it seemed like it was not usually accessible to even the offices of this building. Clang! Ren Xiaosu cut open the door. Before proceeding up to the fourth story, he hid stealthily behind a window and took a look outside. He saw more than 100 soldiers already gathered below the tower. With a glare, Ren Xiaosu began to search through the entirety of the fourth story. It would still take a while for the brigade outside the base to get back. If there were 500 Zong Consortium soldiers in the base, there would only be about 300 soldiers below the tower after taking into account the 100 or so troops he had just killed. To be honest, Ren Xiaosu was hoping he could attract an even greater number of Zong Consortium troops back to the base. This was so he would get a better opportunity to kill the Zong Consortium's higher-ups once he rushed out of here. As such, Ren Xiaosu believed that his plan of breaking into the Zong Consortium's base had achieved its goal of disrupting their plans. When he slashed open another locked door, Ren Xiaosu was startled. He instinctively thought of ducking into the corner to hide as he saw 30 soldiers standing inside this spacious room. But Ren Xiaosu realized what was going on. After he broke into the room, the soldiers did not even move. They just stood like statues. Ren Xiaosu cautiously looked at them and was shocked to discover he actually knew these soldiers. Weren't these the Yang Consortium's nanosoldiers? When Yang Xiaojun was assigned to exterminate the bandits, her third uncle had sent a platoon of nanosoldiers to ensure her safety. But Ren Xiaosu never saw those nanosoldiers again after Yang Xiaojun suddenly took him on another route to the valley. But shouldn't these nanosoldiers have continued marching north with Zong Cheng? Even if they had failed to exterminate the bandits or encountered something unexpected, it didn't make sense that they would be standing here like statues. Suddenly, Ren Xiaosu remembered what Zhang Jinglan had told him. We have evidence to suspect that Zong Cheng's superpower allows him to gain control of others. A conjecture popped up in Ren Xiaosu's mind. Could these nanosoldiers have fallen under the control of Zong Cheng to become his trump cards? At this moment, the voice from the palace in his mind said, "Nanomachines not paired to a consciousness have been detected. Would you like to establish a connection?" Ren Xiaosu was stunned for a moment. In the past, he could only reset the nanomachines of nanosoldiers who had died, so why was it different this time? Wait a minute. Ren Xiaosu remembered what the palace had said. He realized the condition required for the palace to reset the nanomachines was not dependent on whether a person was dead but whether there was any consciousness controlling them. And these nanosoldiers had been put into some kind of a sleep mode after being controlled by Zongcheng. Therefore, with the consciousnesses forcefully suspended by Zongcheng as well. Living like this could not be more miserable since they did not have control over their own lives. Reset them, Ren Xiaosu answered. Since his last battle in the wilderness, Ren Xiaosu often missed the feeling of having those nanomachines. That was because the armor was like a lifeline that could allow him to ignore the effects of standard firearms for a short duration. Although he missed having them, he had not had the opportunity to search for more new nanomachines. He had almost given up hope, so he was surprised he could actually reunite with the nanomachines here in the Zong Consortium today. As the saying goes, you search high and low only to find it when you least expect it. Removing remote access protocol. Resetting to factory settings. Restarting system. Pairing successful. As a silvery stream gathered towards Ren Xiaosu, he could feel that familiar power returning to his body. He heard shuffling footsteps from downstairs again. It sounded like the troops gathered outside had run out of patience and were going to launch an assault. But Ren Xiaosu chose to ignore them this time and focused on receiving all the nanomachines. What were several hundred Zong Consortium soldiers in the face of the armor? Ren Xiaosu felt a sense of security spreading in him. Once he regained this power, the Zong Consortium's higher-ups living in Stronghold 146 had better start praying hard for themselves. This was Ren Xiaosu at his peak. And Stronghold 146 was destined to be his final battlefield in the northwest. No, Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt it was unnecessary for the Zong Consortium higher-ups to even pray anymore. They might as well just prepare for the deaths. But before all of the nanomachines were fully integrated into his body, the nanosoldiers in the room suddenly charged at him. It seemed like they had received a command from someone. Ren Xiaosu frowned. Zongcheng must have reached somewhere close enough for him to control the nanosoldiers. Zongcheng. When this name flashed through Ren Xiaosu's mind, all he felt was a killing intent. Although all of the nanosoldiers charged at him, these nanosoldiers without nanomachines were fragile as a paper to Ren Xiaosu. At the same time as the nanosoldiers were activated, a man darted in from outside to coordinate with them to kill Ren Xiaosu. This person that had just arrived was Zongcheng. Ren Xiaosu sneered as he drew out his saber to slash at him. But the moment Zongcheng came into the room, he suddenly realized something was not right. He backed off immediately and just managed to dodge Ren Xiaosu's black saber that was coming at him. Zongcheng stared blankly at the nanosoldiers who were heavily injured and shouted at Ren Xiaosu, "Where'd all the nanomachines go? Why have the nanomachines in these nanosoldiers disappeared?" Ren Xiaosu guided the remaining stream of nanomachines into his blood vessels while explaining patiently, "Isn't it normal that there's no nanomachines in nanosoldiers? You don't get a wife in a wife cake." 1. Ren Xiaosu was now certain that even though Zongcheng could control others, he could not control them in the way he could control his shadow clone, whose sensory perception would give feedback to his own senses. Otherwise, Zongcheng would not have rushed into the room at all. Zongcheng was not in the mood to crack lame jokes with Ren Xiaosu at a time like this. When he realized that one of his trump cards had been nullified, he leaped out of a window in the hallway behind him without hesitation. He had decisively jumped from the 4th story in an attempt to join up with the garrison troops below to escape. He knew full well he was no match for Ren Xiaosu. Jumping from the 4th story was better than dying on the spot. But this time, Ren Xiaosu would definitely not allow him to continue living. If he missed this chance to get him, Zongcheng would probably conceal himself and escape from here. At that time, it would be difficult to find him again in the sea of people. So for Ren Xiaosu, this was his only chance to get him. Ren Xiaosu instantly covered his entire body with the armor and stood by the window. He saw Zongcheng limping towards the Zong Consortium's defensive line while shouting at him, "Kill that man at the window. Fire at him." But as the hail of bullets hit the armor, they could only see sparks flying. Under the gazes of the Zong Consortium's soldiers, a huge and massive armored being suddenly leaped and crashed down in front of them without any fancy moves. With this leap, Ren Xiaosu took out the Zong Consortium's defensive line in the most dominating fashion. Chapter 458 Killing Spree. Zong Cheng was a supernatural being the Zong Consortium's higher-ups had been watching closely since his appearance. Because his superpower allowed him to control others, this was an extremely useful skill in the eyes of the authority figures. Although this was a time where supernatural beings were rising up in the world, and their individual combat prowess was also being magnified to the extreme, they were still only human. No matter what powers a supernatural being had, they would inevitably possess a physique far superior to a normal person's, and that was why Zong Cheng dared to jump down from the 4th story. If it were a normal person, they would have fractured all of the bones in their body. However, Zong Cheng only sprained his foot. Zong Cheng was normally the person in charge of the brigade garrisoned at Stronghold 146 due to his status as a family member of the Zong Consortium's main branch. As he was also a supernatural being, all the soldiers and officers of the brigade followed his lead. In the eyes of the Zong Consortium's soldiers, Zong Cheng was a powerful and mysterious person. When Zong Cheng received the news and rushed back to the base, many of the soldiers felt the situation would get under control as he was back. No matter how powerful the enemy in the administrative building was, would they not be able to handle him with a supernatural being and several hundred elite soldiers on their side? But the reality was that Zong Cheng had jumped out of the window in an extremely pathetic manner after they had just formed the defensive line at ground level. His previously glossy hair was also in a disheveled state while his expression betrayed a look of fear. As a core figure of the Zong Consortium, he usually portrayed himself as a very powerful man. However, he was not actually as powerful as everyone thought. Zong Cheng's jump dealt a severe blow to the morale of the entire garrison. This was even more damaging than any physical injuries they could receive. They suddenly felt that the enemy they were facing was invincible. If even a supernatural being like Zong Cheng was trying to escape, what could these normal soldiers do against the enemy? But Zong Cheng did not care about that. Since his trump card was now lost, he only thought about fleeing. This was when a huge object leaped out of the window from the 4th story and landed on the defensive line below. No one expected the enemy would be so strong that he could just tear apart the defensive formation so easily. With such an imperious gesture, the enemy's intentions were fully laid out even if he did not say a word. "I dare to stand before you for I fear none of you." Although the soldiers at the defensive line were badly shaken, they still knew what they had to do. They immediately consolidated their firepower and started shooting at the armored being. After some modifications by Wang Yuqi, and Yuqian, and the rest of the students, the armor looked even more menacing now and exuded an aura of violence. The armor no longer had a flat and smooth surface. Instead, it was made up of a dense honeycomb structure that was carefully engineered by an Yuqian. To others, the surface of the armor looked just like a dull matte finish. But upon closer inspection, they would discover it was made up of countless honeycombs. A physical structure like this not only required fewer materials to build but was also far more useful for shock absorption than a smooth and flat surface. As countless bullets rained down at the armor, Ren Xiaosu's gaze remained dead set on the escaping Zong Cheng. Zong Cheng was limping towards the outside of the base, and it could be seen that he did not care about the survival of the soldiers behind him. As he was a supernatural being, he could run faster than normal people even with a sprained ankle. At this moment, Zong Cheng was enduring the pain in his ankle as he fled desperately to join up with the Zong Consortium's main forces in Stronghold 146. He had injured the soft tissue in his ankle during the jump and torn his cartilage. If he continued running like this, he might not be able to fully recover. But even if he had to lose his leg from overexertion, it was still better than losing his life. Not only that, Zong Cheng even commanded the other soldiers to intercept the enemy as he made a run for it. Ren Xiaosu glanced at the Zong Consortium soldiers in front of him and suddenly charged towards Zong Cheng. The Zong Consortium soldiers who tried to block Ren Xiaosu were weak as toys. In just a few seconds, Ren Xiaosu broke through the defensive line. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu was throwing grenades at the enemy as he fought them, as though it cost him nothing at all. Even at this moment, Ren Xiaosu had still not forgotten he was here to wipe out the troops of Stronghold 146. If he could kill the Zong Consortium's higher-ups as well, that would be even better. Now that he was in his peak condition, he would kill as many Zong Consortium soldiers as he could. Only by doing so would the Zong Consortium be afraid of him. When he would try to kill the Zong Consortium's higher-ups later on, he would face less resistance from the troops. At this moment, the Zong Consortium's base was no longer able to organize any new forces to stop him. The remaining soldiers who luckily survived could only watch in fear as Ren Xiaosu continued his pursuit of Zong Cheng. They suddenly realized that this supernatural being that had appeared out of nowhere must have had some sort of a feud with their brigade commander. And the brigade commander they usually feared so greatly was not as strong as they had imagined. Of course, they could never have expected that Han Yang, the person their brigade commander relied on the most, had already been sniped by Yang Xiaojun in the wilderness. Furthermore, those 30 nanosoldiers were like a gift Zong Cheng had been putting aside for Ren Xiaosu and waiting for him to claim. If Zong Cheng had controlled other supernatural beings, that would have really given Ren Xiaosu a headache. But to him, those nanosoldiers were no threat at all but a pleasant surprise. When Zong Cheng reached the gate of the base, he was overjoyed. He saw that some of the troops from the search party had returned at this moment as reinforcements. He shouted at him, "The enemy is right behind me. Kill him." Approximately 500 of the Zong Consortium's troops had returned. As this was a battalion, Zong Cheng was finally able to feel more at ease. As he had controlled the nanosoldiers, he knew full well that the usage of the nanomachines was limited by a power source. If a nanosoldier were to fully unleash the power of the nanomachines, they would only last around 10 minutes. With the number of troops here, he could easily pile them on him and finish him off. And the enemy was all by himself. The last time the Zong Consortium attacked Ren Xiaosu in the wilderness, he had only managed to get away because he had Wang Kongyang's steam locomotive supporting him. And besides, that supernatural being who could trigger a giant earthquake was not in Stronghold 146 either. At the thought of Wang Kongyang's name, Zong Cheng still grew angry. Although Wang Kongyang claimed he had a grudge against Ren Xiaosu, he still helped him secretly. And because of Wang Kongyang's seizure of Zongwu's assets, the higher-ups had indirectly pushed the blame on him as well. Someone privately reminded him that the elders felt he should have killed off Wang Kongyang when he made his move on him back then. How could he have allowed such a powerful supernatural being to get away? But there was no time to think about that anymore. He would just have to kill Ren Xiaosu first. But when Zong Cheng turned around, he suddenly saw a steam locomotive breaking through the Zong Consortium's formation and charging at him. The Zong Consortium troops who had just returned did not even have time to react as more than half of them got crushed like they were toy blocks. Zong Cheng was a little bewildered. Why had the steam locomotive suddenly appeared here when he did not see Wang Kongyang around? Chapter 459 Destroying the Formation. When he saw the steam locomotive approaching, Zong Cheng had an epiphany. After considering the doubts that had accumulated in his mind in recent days and analyzing them further, he surmised that the steam locomotive was probably not Wang Kongyang's doing at all. Instead, it was probably Ren Xiaosu's own power. Although Zong Cheng did not really want to accept such a presumption, he had no other choice. And once this presumption was established, many things that happened previously could finally be explained. For example, why had Zhu Xianchu's shadow clone appeared at two different locations? Zhu Xianchu had admitted before that he could not control the shadow clone beyond a distance of 1 kilometer. And for example, Wang Kongyang's steam locomotive was known to only have 4 carriages, but why did the Zong Consortium's troops keep seeing one that had 16? Therefore, Ren Xiaosu's superpower was that he could copy the superpowers of other supernatural beings. This made Zong Cheng even more fearful. If supernatural beings were the gods of the world, what kind of existence would a supernatural being that could outrageously copy the powers of other supernatural beings, and even further enhance them, be? When Zong Cheng attacked Ren Xiaosu's group, he did not give a fuck about this young man. His target had all along been Yang Xiaojun and the organization backing her, the saboteurs. Now, Zong Cheng realized that he had made a huge mistake. Suddenly, Zong Cheng stopped a military off-road vehicle that was speeding back to the base. He dragged the Zong Consortium soldier out of the driver's seat and threw him onto the ground. Then he drove the vehicle away. As the night curfew had already been imposed on Stronghold 146, there were no pedestrians out on the streets. Only the Zong Consortium's soldiers could be seen patrolling. But no matter how many soldiers came back as reinforcements, Zong Cheng was not going to turn around anymore. He just shouted into the vehicle's walkie-talkie and commanded all of the Zong Consortium soldiers in Stronghold 146 to come back to hold off Ren Xiaosu. Zong Cheng thought to himself, there should be an extent to how much supernatural beings can use their superpowers, right? For example, he could only control 30 to 50 people with his power. In that case, there also had to be a limit for the steam locomotive. Didn't it get blown into thin air after being bombed by the landmines in the wilderness? As long as he had enough soldiers, he could crush Ren Xiaosu. Zong Cheng regained his composure slightly. One by one, the Zong Consortium's troops started returning to the base, with the largest consisting of a full company, while the smaller groups were made up of individual platoons. These sporadic forces would not be enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. Zong Cheng looked at his surroundings and immediately ordered through the radio, I'm leading the target towards Zijing Road now. All soldiers in the vicinity of Zijing Road, organize a defensive formation immediately and mount HMGs. Make sure to stop the steam locomotive that's chasing me. This would be the most effective method. Zong Cheng knew he could not run away aimlessly and should instead lead Ren Xiaosu to where the Zong Consortium's soldiers were the most concentrated so they could take him out while he was exhausted. It was destined to be a sleepless night in Stronghold 146 tonight. The alarm that blared through the night, along with the explosions and gunfire, would make it difficult for any residents in the stronghold to fall asleep. As some people watched quietly from a residential building on the street, they got a strange feeling. During the day, it was the Zong Consortium that was chasing after the young man. But now that it was nighttime, why had it suddenly become the young man chasing after the Zong Consortium soldiers while driving a train? Why had the roles suddenly reversed? Clarion and pleasant clangs of metal rang out as the steam locomotive traveled. This was the first time the residents in the stronghold witnessed a superpower with their own eyes. A child leaning against the windowsill shouted to their parents, "Daddy, it's a toy train." There were railroad tracks and trains that operated between Stronghold 146 and Stronghold 145, and many of the residents had taken them before. But in recent years, the Zong Consortium had been preparing for the war so intensively that the trains had become an exclusive means of transport for the military. When the adults heard their child's words, the father said with a complicated expression, "My child, that is a real train." Zheng Yuandong, the King Consortium's spy, was standing at a window somewhere in the stronghold. He had just witnessed with his very own eyes an off-road vehicle of the Zong Consortium fleeing with a train chasing behind it. Zheng Yuandong had heard of car chases before, but this was the first time he saw something like that, and this one even involved a train. Zheng Yuandong was probably one of the few who really knew what was happening here. He was the one who had personally led Ren Xiaosu into the base, while the steam locomotive had come charging out of there. Without even needing to analyze, he guessed what was going on. It was just that he could not understand why this young man was being so vicious. After Zheng Yuandong led Ren Xiaosu to the garrison base, he went back and reported to Luolan that it was probably the end for that kid. After all, he would definitely be done for by barging into such a tightly defended base by himself. At that time, Luolan remained silent for a while before saying, "I understand." He made his own choice. Even an idiot could sense the sadness in Luolan's tone when he said that. But what was he supposed to tell Boss Luo now? He could say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It wasn't the end for that young man. It's the Zong Consortium that was done for." Zheng Yuandong quietly climbed to the roof of a building. He was moving freely on top of the buildings and could leap 5 to 6 meters across buildings with a single step even though the gap felt like a gulf. Although he was not a supernatural being, he was one of the toughest spies in the King Consortium's secret troops. Zheng Yuandong chased after the train for the entire time and saw for himself how the steam locomotive was smashing through every obstacle. The young man in the train calmly pursued the off-road vehicle in front of him and even threw several grenades from time to time. Ren Xiaosu had already put away his armor and stored the nanomachines back into his body to recharge it for the next battle. When he turned his head, he saw Zheng Yuandong leaping and scurrying across the roofs. He smiled and waved at Zheng Yuandong. He also signaled for him to stay away in case he accidentally got hurt. Just what kind of mental fortitude did he need to have to remain smiling in the face of all the danger around him? He wanted to tell Luo Lan every detail about today's events so the King Consortium could reassess the capability of this young man from an objective point of view. Ren Xiaosu had pursued Zongcheng until they were in the vicinity of Zijing Road. The traffic lights were still flashing at the huge intersection, while the neon lights on the surrounding buildings were still lit up. Hundreds of Zong Consortium soldiers stood guard at this intersection armed with a massive amount of weapons as they waited for the strange steam locomotive to enter their kill zone. Even Zongcheng could not help but step on the brakes when he saw the formation up ahead and wondered if they would be enough to stop Ren Xiaosu. But before the steam locomotive could arrive, something strange suddenly landed at the Zong Consortium's position via the shadow door. A soldier looked over and caught sight of it. He was surprised to see 4 playing cards lying on the ground. He saw 4 sixes, with the spade, heart, club, and diamond suits shining extraordinarily bright. At first, some of the soldiers did not even realize what was going on. They thought it was their fellow comrades who had accidentally dropped the cards and were wondering who had brought them here. If their commanding officer found out, they would probably be severely punished. But before they could figure it out, they saw the 4 sixes grow brighter and brighter. With a loud boom, the explosive poker instantly blasted close to 100 people into the sky. Chapter 460 Proxy Murder. The explosive power and destructive range of these explosive poker cards were a dozen times greater than those of a grenade. It would be great if a grenade thrown into a defensive position could blow up a few people. So if Ren Xiaosu still had to rely on his grenades here, he would probably get shot to death first in a confrontation with the defensive line. Ren Xiaosu had been keeping these 4 sixes as his trump card for a long time. He had always decried how difficult it was to get the higher value cards from explosive poker. He had been looking forward to witnessing the might of the jokers. However, gathering 4 sixes proved to be the limit after he tried collecting the cards for a long time. In that instant, a huge shockwave surged outwards like a tidal wave. Some of the residents in the surrounding were secretly watching from their homes. But when that shockwave swept through, the people hiding behind their windows were pushed backwards. The glass windows of the off-road vehicle Zongcheng was in were instantly shattered while the body shook non-stop. He heard a ringing in his ears and suddenly lost his sense of hearing. Looking at the Zong Consortium's defensive position burning up in flames in front of him, Ren Xiaosu rammed straight through it, sneering as he stood in the cab unit. The explosive poker's 4 sixes were powerful enough to destroy this formation of a few hundred people. Ren Xiaosu estimated that a little less than half of the soldiers at this position were fortunate enough to not die. But what could they do even if they survived? These Zong Consortium soldiers had already lost their fighting spirit after the blast. They did not even have the ability to think straight anymore. Zongcheng's ears were still ringing as he stepped on the gas and continued to escape. Fortunately, he was pretty far away from the defensive line when the blast occurred, or he would have died in the explosion. Ren Xiaosu had tried to use the shadow door to kill Zongcheng by dropping some grenades on him. However, as the two of them were moving at high speeds, and with the shadow door having some margin of error as well, Ren Xiaosu did not manage to succeed even after several attempts. But Ren Xiaosu gave up trying when he noticed the situation at Zijing Road and wondered where Zongcheng would lead him in the course of his escape. It was not that he was intentionally teasing Zongcheng, but if he were to only kill him, that would probably have too small an impact on the overall situation of the war. Ren Xiaosu's reason for coming to Stronghold 146 was to resolve the problem Fortress 178 was facing. He was unaware that the Zong Consortium troops in the Gobi had already been intercepted by Zhu Xianchu, nor did he know about the might of Zhang Jinggelin's contingency plan. So now that Ren Xiaosu was in enemy territory, he decided he had to seriously consider the big picture as well after he had calmed down. Where could Zongcheng escape to in his panic? Where would the Zong Consortium's fighting forces in Stronghold 146 be concentrated? At the side of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups, of course. Zheng Yuandong had told Ren Xiaosu before that half of the brigade at Stronghold 146 was trying to capture him while the other half was in charge of guarding the Zong Consortium's board members. At this moment, the soldiers searching for Ren Xiaosu were still scattered across the stronghold, so Zongcheng could not organize them effectively within a short time. Therefore, in Zong Cheng's eyes, it would only be possible for him to be saved by the troops who were currently guarding the Zong Consortium's higher-ups. Actually, Zong Cheng had just realized this as he was fleeing from Ren Xiaosu. Looking into the rearview mirror, he found that the steam locomotive behind him was constantly keeping its distance. In a way, it felt like Ren Xiaosu was walking a dog. He had planned on leading Ren Xiaosu to a place with the largest number of troops so they could wear him down. But now, it felt more like he was leading Ren Xiaosu to attack the Zong Consortium troops in the stronghold. Zong Cheng's face was covered in blood. His scalp had been cut by shrapnel that got blasted out of the massive explosion. With the blood flowing down his face, Zong Cheng appeared even more savage. He was not stupid, so he immediately understood the scattered defensive forces had given Ren Xiaosu a sweet taste of things to come. Now, his opponent was deliberately letting him lead the way so he could find the other troops in the stronghold, which was where the Zong Consortium's higher-ups were. Zong Cheng was stuck between a rock and a hard place. While he watched the steam locomotive in the rearview mirror, he considered whether he should continue heading to where the Zong Consortium's higher-ups were. If he led Ren Xiaosu there and dragged in the board members, he would probably bear the consequences after the war. But Zong Cheng got the thought, but where else can I go now? Although the board members' residences were at 3 separate locations, and even though some of them were elders from the same family branch as him, what choice did he have? He could only head to where the elders of the board were. After all, their troops were more elite and orderly. Zong Cheng was struck by another thought. Since there were more than 2,000 soldiers in the defensive forces guarding the elders, that should be more than enough to stretch Ren Xiaosu's mental strength to the limit, right? In fact, Zong Cheng was not wrong to think this way. From any normal person's point of view, there should be limits to a supernatural being's power no matter how ferocious they were. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu had just been chased around by the search party in the stronghold. If he was really as powerful as a god, why would he have needed to hide from his pursuers? In reality, the Zong Consortium had committed a strategic mistake tonight. They did not expect that Ren Xiaosu would actually head to the Zong Consortium's base. Due to the search party being scattered across the stronghold, Ren Xiaosu had gained the upper hand there. Furthermore, the Zong Consortium made another mistake, which was Zong Cheng misjudging Ren Xiaosu's mental strength. He thought he could completely wear down Ren Xiaosu by having an overwhelming number of people on his side. But actually, not even Ren Xiaosu knew the limits of his mental strength. Zong Cheng calmed down a little. Since he had judged that Ren Xiaosu would soon get stretched to his limits, he could probably make an issue out of this matter to boost himself. Although the crisis was imminent, politicking could still turn bad happenings into good outcomes. He only needed to lead Ren Xiaosu to the territory of the other 2 Zong Consortium factions. On the one hand, he could wear down Ren Xiaosu with the number of troops standing guard there, and on the other hand, he could dispose of his dissidents with Ren Xiaosu's help. As a matter of fact, it was not always smooth sailing for him and Zong Xiang in the Zong Consortium. That was because the Zong Consortium's 3rd and 4th houses had joined forces to fight against their main branch, which was the most authoritative in the organization. As there was still more than 1,000 soldiers combined under those 2 family branches, they should be more than enough to wear Ren Xiaosu down in 2 separate battles. After that, his main branch would swoop in and clear up the mess before he opened up peace talks with Fortress 178. In that way, not only would the influence of his main branch not decrease, it might even grow stronger. Then, after a few years of rebuilding, he could make a comeback. When he thought of this, Zong Cheng yanked on the steering wheel and drove in another direction. The pursuit had been going on for almost an hour. Zong Cheng was speeding to the 3rd house's territory with Ren Xiaosu chasing him. The troops outside of the 3rd Ancillary Branch's manor had already set up check hedgehogs to stop any vehicles from entering. They also had guards standing by with heavy weapons in waiting. When Zong Cheng was about to arrive at the manor, he shouted on the radio, "Move the hedgehogs away and let me through." The soldiers were somewhat hesitant, but Zong Cheng yelled again, "I'm Zong Cheng, commander of the 107th Combat Brigade. I'm ordering all of you to move the hedgehogs away right now and prepare to face the enemy." Although the troops guarding outside the 3rd Ancillary Branch's manor were also under the 107th Combat Brigade, they were mainly responsible for protecting the manor. As the battalion commander was the eldest son of the 3rd Ancillary Branch, he didn't really heed Zong Cheng's orders. An officer just stared at Zong Cheng from the forward position as the off-road vehicle approached. However, it did not look like he would be stepping aside. He did not have any intention of letting Zong Cheng through. Chapter 461 A Spent Force. After arriving outside the manor, Zong Cheng realized he might have taken too big of a risk. The third ancillary branch was refusing to save him. Zong Cheng was terribly upset as his ears were still ringing. Zong Cheng said coldly over the radio, "Fourth brother, aren't you afraid the main branch will take revenge on you later if you refuse to help me? Our main house might not be able to do anything about the entire third house, but do you think you can get away if we're only fighting against you? There's only one supernatural being pursuing me, so the troops here are enough to handle him." Fourth brother was the eldest son of the third ancillary branch, as well as the commander of the 1229th Battalion, which was under the 107th Combat Brigade. Fourth brother lividly pondered this for a few seconds before saying, "Move the hedgehogs aside and let Zong Cheng through." Seeing that the hedgehogs had been shifted away, Zong Cheng was overjoyed. Then he floored it and drove forward. However, he did not stop after entering the defensive position and continued driving deeper into the manor. He was going to escape from the western entrance of the manor. When fourth brother saw Zong Cheng continuing to flee, he felt that something was wrong. If the troops here were really enough to handle the supernatural being as Zong Cheng had claimed, why would he still need to run away? The Zong Consortium's fourth brother growled, "Zong Cheng, you treacherous bastard, you're despicable." "Sir, what should we do now?" the deputy commander of the 1229th Battalion asked. "Defend the position, as if a supernatural being can take on an entire stronghold all by themselves," the Zong Consortium's fourth brother said. As the steam locomotive approached the manor, Ren Xiaosu resorted to his usual tactic again and started dropping grenades on the defensive line to break it up. In between, he also threw out 4.5s from the explosive poker deck he had. However, the power of 4.5s was much weaker than that of 4.6s. Then 3 soldiers on the Zong Consortium's defensive position carrying RPG launchers fired at Ren Xiaosu. As the steam locomotive was a really large target, how could the RPGs miss? But as they waited for the RPGs to explode, they saw the huge steam locomotive transforming into black mist. A second later, an armored being sprang out of the mist. While still in midair, he contorted his body and dexterously dodged the incoming RPGs by passing through the gaps between them. When the armor-clad Ren Xiaosu landed on the ground, he started charging forward, making the entire ground quake as he did so. The Zong Consortium's soldiers felt a sense of powerlessness. Seeing that their bullets were totally ineffective against their enemy and with their RPGs missing him entirely, they didn't know how to deal with him. However, Ren Xiaosu did not engage the enemies here any further. He was only looking to destroy the manor quickly with his grenades and kill as many of the enemy's troops as possible. The third house was doomed. Of course, Ren Xiaosu could not guarantee that all the places he had just attacked would end up getting destroyed, nor could he finish off the soldiers and members of the Zong Consortium who had survived the blast. Whether or not they were killed was all down to luck. After the third ancillary branch's manor was attacked, an old man crawled out from under the ruins. When the Zong Consortium's battalion commander saw that his father was all right, he immediately ran forward to help him up. "Father, let's retreat. We can't stay here any longer." The old man looked especially comical when the combova used to cover his bald head were scattered. He snapped, "Retreat. Haven't you realized by now? This is the main branch's scheme. Zong Cheng has more than 1,000 soldiers under his command, yet he couldn't even stop a supernatural being. No matter how strong a supernatural being is, they don't have an endless amount of mental strength. So why was that supernatural being still up and running? It's obvious that Zong Cheng is taking this chance to eliminate his dissidents." The expression on this battalion commander's face turned extremely sullen. Earlier, when Zong Cheng entered the defensive position and continued fleeing, he had already thought that something was amiss. The elder's expression turned dark. "That little shit, Zong Cheng, has turned against our Zong Consortium, so don't blame me for not caring about our family ties. Call the fourth branch immediately. We must unite against the main branch." After so many years of infighting within the Zong Consortium, Zong Cheng's first thoughts after encountering Ren Xiaosu's attack on Stronghold 146 was to lead him to wipe out the third and fourth ancillary branches. At the same time, he also wanted to use the third and fourth house's strength to wear down Ren Xiaosu. Meanwhile, after the third house was implicated, they did not choose to flee, nor mention anything about organizing a search party to hunt down Ren Xiaosu. Instead, they immediately wanted to join up with the other faction to get their revenge. But when their call to the fourth ancillary branch connected, the person answering immediately said, "That little shit, Zong Cheng, brought a supernatural being to our manor. Hurry over here, we need reinforcements." The third house fell silent. It seemed that the fourth house was done for as well. Stronghold 146 was in utter chaos now. However, Zong Cheng could no longer clearly hear the nearby explosions due to the ringing in his ears. He looked in his rearview mirror and was surprised to see the armored being still chasing after him. However, it seemed to have slowed down somewhat. Zong Cheng sneered to himself. He felt that his plan had probably succeeded. Zong Cheng did not even consider the possibility that Ren Xiaosu might be tricking him. Even if Ren Xiaosu were a god, he would still get tired after battling for so long. He took a phone out of his pocket and called his father. As soon as the call went through, Zong Cheng quickly said, "Father, that Ren Xiaosu should be at his limits. I'll lead him to our manor right away, so get ready for battle. After we kill him, we can consolidate the resources left behind by the third and fourth houses." On the other end, his father shouted, "Don't you fucking bring him here." But Zong Cheng could barely hear anything due to his tinnitus. He said, "Okay, I'll bring him over right away." Then Zong Cheng ended the call and focused back on driving. He even looked at the fuel gauge. Although the gas tank was close to empty, there was enough for him to drive back to the entrance of his manor. But as he was making his escape, Zong Cheng suddenly felt an inkling of danger. He saw the shadow door appear next to him in the vehicle, then felt a saber gently slash him before disappearing. Zong Cheng was shocked. When the black saber disappeared, he immediately began to inspect his wound. However, he realized that it was just a superficial injury. Learning this, Zong Cheng felt slightly relieved. It looked like his enemy had missed. But before he could dwell any further on it, the shadow door appeared again. He felt another slash that left a wound on him that was neither shallow nor deep. Would Zong Cheng still not understand what was going on at this moment? His enemy was obviously trying to torture him. Ren Xiaosu clearly had the chance to kill him, yet he did not seem to be in a hurry to do so. Zong Cheng felt humiliated. This was his first time facing this type of situation. There was nothing he could do but step harder on the gas pedal and continue to escape. At this moment, Zheng Yuandong was standing on the roof of a tall building that overlooked the stronghold. He was stunned by what he saw. Previously, he thought he had overestimated Ren Xiaosu's abilities. But right now, this King Consortium spy was finding it a little hard to believe. A lone supernatural being was absolutely dominating the entire Zong Consortium's Stronghold 146. Zheng Yuandong knew that a lot of what was happening here was mainly opportunistic. For example, Ren Xiaosu had disrupted the entire Zong Consortium plan by attacking their military base. While the troops that were scattered around the stronghold wanted to return as reinforcements, they were not as mobile as Ren Xiaosu. Therefore, they could only rush back in small waves like servers sending dishes to a table in a 10-course dinner. Of course, Ren Xiaosu would not have achieved this either if he were not ruthless enough. Zheng Yuandong had seen for himself how Ren Xiaosu had used an unknown method to somehow blow up the Zong Consortium's defensive positions. Furthermore, he could even protect himself with steel armor, drive a steam locomotive, and not feel threatened by firearms and explosives. Zheng Yuandong had taken a shortcut to the manor of the Zong Consortium's main house. When he saw how the third and fourth houses were destroyed, he knew that Ren Xiaosu's next target would most likely be the main house. But Zheng Yuandong was worried about how Ren Xiaosu had wasted some time to destroy the manors of the third and fourth ancillary branches. As such, the Zong Consortium's main branch had already reorganized some of the stray troops and gathered them outside of their manor. Chapter 462 A Surprise Attack. A surprise attack. Smoke was rising up in the stronghold. What was initially a starry night had now turned into a smoky sky in the middle of the night. It was as though a calamity had suddenly descended upon the stronghold. Zong Cheng was driving an off-road vehicle through the empty streets as he fled for his life. Zong Cheng was covered with slash wounds as he tried unsuccessfully to evade the shadow door. It was a pest as Ren Xiaosu continuously tortured him throughout the pursuit. Fortunately, a small group of reinforcements appeared and managed to delay Ren Xiaosu a little. This allowed Zong Cheng to get away from the endless torture of being cut by the saber. The stronghold residents no longer dared to watch the commotion. All of them hid in their bathrooms at home, afraid that a sudden attack would deal them collateral damage. The Zong Consortium troops scattered across the stronghold streamed towards the main branch's manor, with someone giving them orders to assemble through the radio. The Zong Consortium's higher-ups in that manor were panicking. They could only hope that it was not too late. Zheng Yuandong finally made it here as well. He concealed himself on the roof of a tall building and watched the situation unfold. The sky in the distance was filled with smoke and fire, like it represented the Zong Consortium's future going up in flame. Although the Zong Consortium was beginning to collapse on the fronts, they could still rely on the vast territory to fight a strategic war if they compacted the defensive lines once more. As Fortress 178 had too few soldiers, if they continued to march into the heartland where Stronghold 146 was, the worry was that their battlefront would get overextended. But everything changed with the arrival of a young man at Stronghold 146. In fact, Zheng Yuandong had figured out what Ren Xiaosu was here for. Wasn't he just looking to kill the core figures of the Zong Consortium? Anyone could have guessed it. However, he did not believe that Ren Xiaosu could achieve that at the beginning. At this moment, Zong Cheng looked behind him through the rearview mirror and noticed the speed of the pursuing armored being was slowing down bit by bit. Zong Cheng immediately knew why this was, as he had also used nanomachines before. They were starting to run out of juice. Estimating the time, he knew Ren Xiaosu could not handle such a drawn-out battle even if he had recharged the nanomachines during the pursuit. As the manor was just in front of him, Zong Cheng floored it again. The soldiers outside the entrance automatically moved the hedgehogs aside for him. After Zong Cheng passed through successfully, they returned to the defensive formation. Those cold and unfeeling firearms and heavy weapons were all aiming at the end of the long street. Although Zong Cheng's father was extremely furious by what he had done tonight, the Zong clan's patriarch could not bear to see his son die before his very eyes. Zong Cheng's father was already 71 years old. Both Zong Cheng and Zong Xiang were born when he was at an advanced age, so they were extremely precious to him. The Zong clan's patriarch used to have another son, but he died of lung cancer. This was considered a secret within the Zong clan. 2 years after the eldest son of the main branch had passed away, his wife got pregnant again. Initially, the members of the Zong Consortium were furious and thought the eldest son's widow had dishonored the family name. However, the Zong clan's patriarch stood his ground and took the widow, who was also his daughter-in-law, as his concubine. In modern civilization, concubinage was a regressive practice. Further, she was his own daughter-in-law. Only then did the Zong Consortium's higher-ups finally understand what had happened. So it turned out the Zong clan's patriarch had committed an immoral act. Who else could the widow's child belong to? It was clear the Zong clan's patriarch was responsible. But the Zong Consortium's main branch was firmly in power, so everyone kept quiet as though nothing had happened. Even Zong Cheng and Zong Xiang were unaware of this. However, there were also rumors within the family that Zong Cheng and Zong Xiang might not be the biological sons of the Zong clan's patriarch. After all, the patriarch was so old. As for whether the patriarch had done any paternity tests, no one knew. Zong Cheng had already driven into the manor. Initially, the patriarch wanted to punish him severely. But when he saw Zong Cheng's body covered in blood and wounds, he could not bear to do so anymore. He slapped his face, but that just made Zong Cheng's tinnitus even worse. The patriarch held his anger back and said, "Stand aside. We'll talk about what you did after tonight." Someone off to the side noticed that Zong Cheng was still in a daze, so they hurriedly pulled him aside. The bulky armored being rounded a corner and appeared in front of everyone. In an instant, all the firepower outside the Zong Consortium's manor burst with the intention of annihilating the enemy at the end of the long street. But the armored being did not slow down at all. Instead, it sped up and moved even faster. Zheng Yuandong was standing on the roof of a tall building in the distance as he watched the scene unfold. Under the dark sky, the Zong Consortium's position was like an insurmountable mountain. A violent storm of firepower was created in the atmosphere, while the aggressive armored being approached it ruthlessly in an unpredictable fashion. The sound of the steel armor stomping on the ground reverberated like a heavy war drum that was as loud as thunder. Is this kid really going to continue charging forward? Zheng Yuandong mumbled, the Zong Consortium has called so many troops back here, and Ren Xiaosu should also be at his limits now. He can't be that fearless, right? But just as he finished, he discovered the armored being had picked up speed again. The cold and unfeeling steel armor had remained quiet throughout the battle. But amid the silence, it seemed to be roaring at the Zong Consortium with rage. The clouds of dust that had been kicked up by stray bullets hitting the ground trailed behind the steel armor like a solitary flag waving in the wind as it charged forward. I'm convinced, Zheng Yuandong sighed. Before this era of the rise of supernatural beings, he was the most elite King Consortium spy around. His assassination methods were extremely direct and efficient, and he was a remarkably strong fighter. Even after this era began, Zheng Yuandong still felt that he could kill them even though they were supernatural beings. But tonight, Ren Xiaosu had single-handedly upended his thinking. All of a sudden, he understood that the era he belonged to was truly over. No, I can't accept this. In his boundless solitude, Zheng Yuandong's gaze was fixated on the prominent armored being out in the distance. Suddenly, a resolute strength started growing in his heart. It felt like it was bursting with the force of erupting magma, the bombardment of artillery fire, and the destructive winds of a tornado. That ambition that had accumulated in him over the years burst forth. A second later, Zheng Yuandong looked at the armored being in astonishment. He had actually awakened his superpower. This was the power he had been desiring for a long time. Even after witnessing the birth of so many supernatural beings, Zheng Yuandong had yet to awaken his superpower. But just as he was about to give up on that happening, the sight of how that young man battled on had triggered the immeasurable unacceptance in him. This was what shocked Zheng Yuandong the most. He knew he would not have felt so agitated if he did not see that armored being charging forward with such an indomitable spirit. Since my power has been awakened, does it mean I can help him now? Zheng Yuandong wondered. But before he could come to a decision, he saw the armored being suddenly turn left and run away just as it was about to reach the Zong Consortium's position. Zheng Yuandong and the Zong Consortium's troops were all dumbfounded by the sight. The armored being ran away just like that. Whatever happened to that indomitable spirit? Zong Cheng and the others were also confused by the events as they watched from the manor. The Zong clan's patriarch frowned. He looked at Zong Cheng and asked, "What's going on? Why did he run away?" Zong Cheng said, "Can you speak louder?" The patriarch felt his blood pressure shoot up again and got the urge to slap Zong Cheng. But before he could do so, the orderlies around them shrieked in agony and pain. The Zong clan's patriarch immediately turned around. The young man who had come to kill them had arrived behind them without anyone realizing it. He was holding a black saber, looking invincible. Chapter 463 Comrades. No one knew when the young man arrived at the rear of the Zong Consortium. Even Zheng Yuandong, who had been observing the situation, was unsure. Actually, Zong Cheng's assessment was not wrong. Ren Xiaosu's nanomachines were really at their limits, with the power source almost completely exhausted. Ren Xiaosu was also not too confident of forcing his way into a position that nearly 1,000 soldiers were guarding. After an entire night of fighting, he could not endure the backlash from the steam locomotive anymore. But Zong Cheng and the Zong Consortium's higher-ups were right in front of him, so how could he possibly give up now? If Ren Xiaosu gave up at this point, then he might as well have killed Zong Cheng earlier. If he did not kill Zong Cheng tonight, he would not be able to take it lying down. As such, Ren Xiaosu put his armor onto the shadow clone during the pursuit while no one was paying attention. On one hand, he would not have to worry about himself falling into a dangerous situation even if the nanomachines died midway. On the other hand, the armor solved the problem of the shadow clone getting hit by any stray bullets between its eyes. As the shadow clone was launching its frontal assault on the defensive position while wearing the armor, Ren Xiaosu barged in from the side of the manor. The troops in the Zong Consortium's manor were all concentrated at the front. Throughout the night, Ren Xiaosu had used his actions to mislead Zong Cheng into thinking he would launch a frontal assault. But just as everyone had gotten used to his movements amid the chaos, Ren Xiaosu decided to execute the decapitation strike at the weakest point of the enemy. Before Ren Xiaosu, the defenses at the back of the manor were practically useless. Zong Cheng was shocked when he turned around and saw Ren Xiaosu attacking from behind. Then Ren Xiaosu grabbed one of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups as a human shield as he sped towards him. Zong Cheng shouted without any regard for the human shield, "Kill him. Ignore the human shield and open fire." But the Zong Consortium's soldiers hesitated for a moment. Importantly, the human shield Ren Xiaosu was holding was Zong Cheng's uncle. As Ren Xiaosu held Zong Cheng's uncle and advanced, he sneered at him, "Ask them to save you. Otherwise, I'll kill you right away." Zong Cheng's uncle got so anxious that he swore at Zong Cheng, "Zong Cheng, you little bastard. How dare you ignore my safety?" Suddenly, Zong Cheng raised his gun and shot his uncle dead before he could finish speaking. The soldiers around them and the Zong clan's patriarch were stunned. While they were momentarily stunned, Ren Xiaosu was already bearing down on Zong Cheng. But to everyone's surprise, Zong Cheng, who had long been highly regarded as a supernatural being by the Zong Consortium, did not even put up a fight. Instead, he pushed his father into Ren Xiaosu's saber. With a slash, the Zong clan's patriarch was beheaded. A moment later, Ren Xiaosu threw the human shield in his hands aside and charged Zong Cheng at full speed. As the black saber in his hands cut through the night, it gleamed with a menacing aura. In an era where firearms and explosives were clearly king, this saber was like the sword of judgment that was capable of slicing through anything. When the Zong Consortium's soldiers saw that Ren Xiaosu had nothing to shield himself with after throwing aside the body, they immediately aimed the guns at him. But before they could even pull the trigger, the shadow clone had already come back. The shadow clone ran in a frenzy and crashed into the Zong Consortium troops. The sound of their bones breaking was so loud that it sounded like firecrackers being set off. When the shadow clone barged into the defensive line, it showcased an almost unparalleled level of individual combat power. "City Crusher," Ren Xiaosu roared. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu took a small step forward and slashed the saber horizontally. The glow of burning flames in the distance seemed like they were projecting images on the clouds above. Ren Xiaosu could see Zhu Jinyuan enjoying his corn, Jin Lan wearing a silly smile on his face, Yan Luyuan standing next to Big Sister Xiaoyu as he angrily brought about that disastrous earthquake, as well as that ray of hope that had been destroyed. From that moment onwards, Ren Xiaosu would often recall those scenes over and over every night. He uncovered these wounds in his heart again and again just so he could remind himself not to forget the anger of that day. Even when others thought that it was normal for people to die in war, he wanted to ensure that everyone in the razor-sharp company survived and that no man was left behind. When not even Zhang Xiaoman himself believed he could survive, Ren Xiaosu still insisted on trying. So when Ren Xiaosu was finally confronting Zong Cheng at this moment, it was as though all of the underworld spirits of vengeance had followed him. As it turned out, when he was filled with all this hatred, he wasn't that different from Li Shenton at all. If he did not have that ray of light left in his heart, he would even want the entirety of Stronghold 146 to perish together with the Zong Consortium. Die! As the black saber slashed across Zong Cheng's waist, Ren Xiaosu watched as Zong Cheng gave him an incredulous expression. Then he turned around and left. Behind him, the shadow clone started slashing at the enemies without restraint in a bid to protect him. Moments before a hail of bullets could rain down on him, Ren Xiaosu made his retreat. He no longer had any lingering thoughts of fighting the enemy. It was not that he did not want to continue killing them, but that he must not do so anymore. The Zong Consortium was about to fall apart now that their leaders were dead. Shortly after, the troops from Fortress 178 would arrive to destroy the place, so he did not have to continue taking further risks. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu had been shot. No matter how unexpected it was that he would attack from the enemy's rear just now, there was still some Zong Consortium soldiers who managed to react. So Ren Xiaosu expected he would get shot. As of this moment, Ren Xiaosu had sustained 2 gunshot wounds to his abdomen. He had to shake off the Zong Consortium's pursuit as quickly as possible so he could extract the bullets and apply the black medicine on his wounds. But something else unexpected happened. The shadow clone that was now without the armor got shot again between its eyes. It puffed into a lump of black mist before dissipating away. Ren Xiaosu frowned. He could hear people shouting behind him. Some of them were shouting for medics, while others were alarming everyone else to the presence of an assassin. Ren Xiaosu's pursuers chased after him relentlessly. Although Ren Xiaosu had already leaped out of the manor and run 2 streets away, he still could not shake off the Zong Consortium's troops. Ren Xiaosu could even hear off-road vehicles roaring to life behind him. The Zong Consortium was enraged. Was he cornered now? Ren Xiaosu smiled. So what? Thinking of this, Ren Xiaosu suddenly turned around with his saber raised. He stared at his pursuers at the end of that long street, while the rumbling smoke and cloudy sky seemingly came to a standstill. Come at me. No one had expected that Ren Xiaosu would turn around, nor think that he would dare to take on a 1,000 people when he was already injured. But when his pursuers saw this, they subconsciously stepped on their brakes. They even had thoughts of turning around and fleeing. It felt gratifying when they were chasing after him, but in the course of the pursuit, they never really thought what would happen if they caught up to him. Did they make a suicidal decision to chase him? Although, the Zong Consortium's soldiers knew that, with their numbers, they could simply pile up on the young man and crush him to death. But why would they do that? Who would see it now that the Zong clan's patriarch was dead? Furthermore, many of them would probably die in the process. But when their vehicles came to a stop, they saw Ren Xiaosu suddenly turn around and bolt. Fuck, we've been had. That kid is at his limits. After him. Of course, some of the troops had figured out what was at stake here, so they completely gave up on pursuing him. With this temporary cessation, the pursuers halved. Pursuers. But even though the number of pursuers halved, there was still a lot of them. Some of the troops wanted to kill Ren Xiaosu so they could get a reward. After all, someone would have to take over as the new patriarch of the Zong Consortium, so whoever came to power would definitely have to establish their authority by taking the head of their enemy. And the Zong Consortium would probably not be able to unite for as long as this young man remained alive. Although, they were never really united in the first place. Therefore, the Zong Consortium soldiers who were still pursuing Ren Xiaosu were mostly the ambitious ones. But as Ren Xiaosu fled madly while pressing on his wounds, someone suddenly shouted, "Ren Xiaosu, over here, quick!" Ren Xiaosu was startled. Who was calling out to him? He turned his head to the voice and saw Zhang Xiaoman waving at him cheerfully. Meanwhile, Zhao Xiaochen and the others were busy setting up mortars and heavy machine guns on the street corner. As for the deputy commander of the 1237th Regiment, he was lying helplessly off to the side with his hands and feet bound. After Ren Xiaosu dropped him off in the wilderness, the Razor Shop Company had taken the risk of plundering a military factory to seize the military transport trucks and off-road vehicles in it, all so they could get to Stronghold 146 as quickly as possible. As everyone in the stronghold was attracted by the firepower surrounding Ren Xiaosu tonight, no one noticed the East Gate had been breached by the Razor Shop Company. They did not even encounter any proper resistance. Zhang Xiaoman was standing there in high spirits as he grinned, illuminated by the burning sky. "Get over here, we've come to save you." Ren Xiaosu clutched his abdomen and walked over slowly. "What are y'all doing here?" Nearby, Fu Rao was loading ammunition into a heavy machine gun. "Didn't you say that in our Razor Sharp Company, no man gets left behind?" Zhang Xiaoman chuckled. Suddenly, he mimicked Zhang Jinggelin's tone and said, "Ren Xiaosu, do you still remember what I said?" Ren Xiaosu was silent for a moment before saying with a smile, "You said that people always die in battle. The battlefield is a place where we have to put our trust in fate. Everything lies with fate. No one can control it." Zhang Xiaoman laughed again. "Do you still remember what your reply was?" Back then, Ren Xiaosu had said, "How would we know if we don't try?" All of the Razor Sharp Company was in this together. One for all, and all for one. Since someone had declared that no man from the Razor Sharp Company would be left behind, they would have to keep their word no matter what. Zhang Xiaoman's cheeks looked especially stiff in the illumination of the fiery glow, but he suddenly turned cute. He spat on the ground and said with a smile, "Let's give them a fucking good beating." In that instant, 4 heavy machine guns started spitting out a barrage of fire at the end of the long street. The oncoming Zong Consortium troops were all caught off guard and fell to the ground like dominoes. Someone in the past had killed more than 3,000 people in a single afternoon using 2 heavy machine guns rigged at an intersection. Since the development of firearms, many people had forgotten that in the history of human warfare, heavy machine guns were ranked highest among all weapons for ability to kill. Zheng Yuandong was watching this quietly from afar. He had planned to rush to Ren Xiaosu's rescue, but he discovered that his comrades had already made it to Stronghold 146. Looking at the way the razor-sharp company was providing cover and support to each other, Zheng Yuandong suddenly wished he was not a spy anymore. He wanted to return to the King Consortium to look for his own comrades. Chapter 464: A surprise attack by the Armored Brigade. Ever since Ren Xiaosu entered Stronghold 146, he had been fighting by himself. Even though he encountered Zheng Yuandong, who was a King Consortium spy, the man merely showed him the way forward and never participated in his battles. Just as Zheng Yuandong had said, his personal safety still took precedence over other matters even if Luo Lan had requested him to assist Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu could understand that since it was how the world worked. But things were different after the razor-sharp company broke into the stronghold. While Ren Xiaosu was injured, this group of lunatics set up terrifying heavy machine guns in the streets of the stronghold and claimed the lives of the pursuing Zong Consortium soldiers, providing shelter and protection for Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu was leaning against a wall as he pressed down on his wounds. As there were shops and residential buildings on both sides of the street, some residents in the house behind him were shivering in fear at everything that was going on. But even in his battle to seek revenge tonight, Ren Xiaosu was still very careful to not cause the deaths of any innocent residents. This was all because Zhang Xiaoman had previously said that Fortress 178 had its own set of principles they abided by. How did y'all manage to find me? Ren Xiaosu wondered. The razor-sharp company was unfamiliar with the layout of Stronghold 146. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu had been fighting a highly mobile battle tonight, so it should have been difficult to locate him. Zhang Xiaoman smiled while reloading. After we got into the stronghold, there was a fortune teller waiting for us at the gate. He even pointed out your position to us. At first, we didn't believe him. But after that, we actually heard gunshots coming from the position he pointed to. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Is the fortune teller you're talking about a thin, middle-aged man with a mustache who wears a pair of sunglasses and holds a banner that has the words, Divine Foresight, written on it? Zhang Xiaoman was amused. How did you know? The Zong Consortium's troops had been thoroughly defeated by the razor-sharp company's heavy machine guns. In fact, that momentary burst of fire earlier had even beaten many of the Zong Consortium's soldiers into submission. The soldiers in the off-road vehicles could not even fight back in the face of the heavy machine guns peppering them. If it were under normal circumstances, these Zong Consortium troops would certainly not be so fragile. But now that more than half of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups had either been killed or wounded, the morale of the Zong Consortium's troops was affected. So when the soldiers of the razor-sharp company saw their enemies screaming in defeat, their morale was lifted. Zhao Xiaochen asked, Xiaosu, you know that fortune teller too? I guess so. Ren Xiaosu was a little puzzled. Could that fortune teller be the real deal? But why would he guide the razor-sharp company to save him? Zhang Xiaoman said with a smile, he's one of our Fortress 178's people. I've only heard of him, and I didn't expect to bump into him here. Ren Xiaosu was completely dumbfounded. He's from Fortress 178. That's right. Zhang Xiaoman smiled and said, before we came here, the intelligence director, Wang Fengyuan, called and informed us that someone would receive us at Stronghold 146. He managed to match the code word with us, so that fortune teller is indeed an agent of Fortress 178 assigned here to the Zong Consortium in the north. He's in charge of the planted spies over here. Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt that something was amiss. He said unhappily, that guy's code name is Divine Foresight. No, his code name is Great Hoodwinker. I heard that his code name used to be Divine Foresight, but it was changed to Great Hoodwinker, because he's always scamming his comrades of their pay. Ren Xiaosu suddenly did not feel so good. He had believed 80% of the fortune teller's words. But now that he thought about it, it could have been Zhang Jinglan who told him about Ren Xiaosu having kin who was not related to him by blood. And he still had the cheek to say, "The Northwest is where you will prosper." Could it be that Zhang Jinglan or Wang Fengyuan were channeling their attempts through the great hoodwinker to try to make him stay? Regarding the fortune teller's prediction that the Zong Consortium's higher-ups would be gathering these few days, that was probably intel they had received about a meeting that would be held soon. Then, through the fortune teller, Ren Xiaosu would be guided on how to wipe out the Zong Consortium's higher-ups. So when Ren Xiaosu asked this great hoodwinker to divine his future for him, the man immediately fell silent. How could someone like that fucking be trusted? But how did the fortune teller know about Li Qingzheng? Could it be that he was also a swindler during the time he spent in the south? Even at this moment, Ren Xiaosu was skeptical about him. He felt that there was something strange about this great hoodwinker. Ren Xiaosu asked, "Has the great hoodwinker always been assigned here in the north?" "I dunno," Zhang Xiaoman replied. Ren Xiaosu felt that he wouldn't get to the bottom of this for the time being, so maybe he should treat his injuries first. While the razor-sharp company was firing at the Zong Consortium's troops, Zhao Xiaochen saw Ren Xiaosu using his fingers to directly extract the bullets out of his wounds. He saw Ren Xiaosu in such great pain that his veins were throbbing. His face was flushed red, but he never made a sound. This group of gruff men from the razor-sharp company were totally shocked. Everyone liked to boast about how they were such warriors, especially when it was politically convenient to be known as a warrior back at Fortress 178. If one could not bear hardship, everyone would make fun of them. But no matter how tough they were, they still wouldn't resort to extracting bullets from their wounds personally. After the Zong Consortium troops were completely defeated, the entirety of Stronghold 146 was a mess. Zhang Xiaoman and the others gathered around Ren Xiaosu. "Do you need anesthetics? Your wounds look..." But before they could finish speaking, Ren Xiaosu had already extracted the second bullet. He clenched his teeth and applied the black medicine onto his wounds. "That's okay, I'll recover in 3 days." All of a sudden, Zhang Xiaoman and the others heard the rumbling of armored vehicles rolling on hard ground. The soldiers of the razor-sharp company were shocked. Fuck, could it be that armored brigade? They had come across the 131st Brigade at the edge of the Zong Consortium's territory. At that time, they were even chased into hiding in a gully on 2 occasions. After the armored brigade left, the captured deputy regimental commander guided the razor-sharp company to plunder a military factory and got their hands on some vehicles. Then they took a shortcut and rushed to Stronghold 146. On the way here, they did not encounter the armored brigade again. As such, they forgot about them. But when they heard the sound of the armored vehicles, Zhang Xiaoman and the others looked horrified. No matter how ferocious they were earlier, they could not possibly face an armored brigade head-on. "Run! Let's get out of here quickly!" Zhang Xiaoman roared. Ren Xiaosu asked weakly, "What's the matter?" "I don't have time to explain. Get into the vehicle." With that, a group of people carried Ren Xiaosu into their vehicle. Then they stepped on the gas and drove off in the opposite direction of the armored brigade. The Zong Consortium troops in front were taking cover at a corner of the street to discuss their countermeasures. The only remaining regimental commander of the Zong Consortium's combat brigade was trying to contact the Zong Consortium's higher-ups, but he realized he could not reach any one of them. But when they heard the roaring of engines, someone peeked out and nearly pissed his pants. "They're charging! Regimental commander, they're charging!" The regimental commander also quietly sneaked a peek and was surprised to see the razor-sharp company's vehicles speeding towards them. The regimental commander nearly pissed his pants as well. "Run, run, run!" All of a sudden, the entire stronghold was plunged into chaos again. Chapter 465 Tears of Humiliation. Zheng Yuandong, who was already planning to leave Stronghold 146, was still standing on the roof of the tall building and thinking about life. But midway through his thoughts, he saw a heavily armed armored brigade entering Stronghold 146 via the east gate. Zheng Yuandong was a spy whose main responsibility was keeping tabs on the decisions of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups and the movements of the key fighting forces. However, he never heard anything about the Zong Consortium deploying an armored brigade to Stronghold 146 before. However, he was very familiar with the structure of the Zong Consortium's military forces. He immediately noticed the insignia of those troops and realized it was the 131st Brigade. Didn't these troops get fucking led away by Zhongwu? Why had they come back here again? The situation in the stronghold right now was basically this. The defeated Zong Consortium troops were being pursued by the razor-sharp company, which in turn was being pursued by the armored brigade. It was total pandemonium with everyone driving their vehicles around in panic. The Zong Consortium troops at the front were driving hastily as they were scared out of their wits by the razor-sharp company. They did not even stop their vehicles for a moment as they fled from the east to the west. After driving for more than 10 kilometers, they were about to reach the west gate. Suddenly, the west gate opened. It seemed that some of the Zong Consortium soldiers were also starting to abandon their posts and had opened the gate to escape. The regimental commander of the Zong Consortium troops said in a trembling voice, "Of all the troops in the stronghold, why must they chase us?" A soldier suddenly said, "I think I hear the sound of armored vehicles and tanks behind us." The regiment commander grew ever more flustered. "What? Fortress 178's armored brigade has arrived as well." They could not even see what the situation behind them was, much less notice the unit insignia of the pursuing troops at the rear. As the regimental commander held a very high rank in the military, he knew full well that there were no friendly troops in the vicinity. Therefore, he assumed the sound of the armored vehicles belonged to Fortress 178. As they fled in panic, their ability to think rationally was destroyed. Although it was unrealistic that Fortress 178's campaign would have reached here already, these troops could no longer think properly. If even Stronghold 146 could be rampaged through by a lone supernatural being, what was impossible? Zheng Yuandong was stunned by this sight. He watched with his own eyes as the three forces tried to overtake each other until all of them finally disappeared into the distance. Whatever, it's none of my business. I'll just return to the King Consortium. The entire northwest had descended into chaos. If Zheng Yuandong wanted to leave, now was the best time to do so. After the razor-sharp company and armored brigade exited from the stronghold's west gate, they started driving south. The Zong Consortium troops ahead of them were nearly driven to despair. Didn't they already escape from the stronghold? So why were those people still chasing after them? Did they not want Stronghold 146 anymore? Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company did not stop driving or attack the vehicles in front of them. They were clearly very close to the enemy ahead of them, but there was only one path, and it was only wide enough for two vehicles to drive side by side on. If any vehicles ahead of them rolled over, the razor-sharp company would get caught between the wreck and the armored brigade behind them. Suddenly, one of the Zong Consortium soldiers took a look behind. The vehicles they're driving look like those from our military. Could they share the same radio frequency? The regimental commander turned around to have a look and realized it was true. He immediately had the soldier in the passenger seat try every frequency to see if he could get in touch with the razor-sharp company and discuss some workaround to the situation. Sure enough, after he switched to an encrypted frequency and shouted into it, a reply came from the other end. The regimental commander was overjoyed. "Friends from Fortress 178, please don't pursue us anymore. We'll be retiring to the countryside to farm, so can you guys please stop?" However, the other party answered, "No." The regimental commander turned furious and shouted, "Do you really have to be so ruthless?" The soldiers of the razor-sharp company looked at each other, then at the armored brigade not too far behind them, and realized they did not know how to respond. The Zong Consortium troops in the front roared, "Then surely we can stop our vehicles. We'll surrender. Fortress 178 doesn't kill captives, right?" Zhang Xiaoman was starting to get anxious. "No stopping, keep driving. If you dare stop, I'll kill you. There's only one fucking road out here and the shoulder's full of muck, so if you all stopped here, wouldn't we get blocked as well?" When the regimental commander in front heard this, tears of humiliation rolled down his cheeks. "Why aren't you accepting our surrender? Must you really force us to flee? Could those fucking Fortress 178 troops think that it's fun to torture us like this?" That might be possible. But at this moment, one of the soldiers finally saw a full view of the armored brigade that was the farthest back while making a large turn. He wondered, wait a minute, isn't that armored brigade in the rear our comrades? What? The regimental commander was surprised. He did not care about the danger anymore and peeked out to look back. The paint on the exterior of the armored brigade clearly showed them to be their Zong Consortium troops. The regimental commander picked up the vehicle's walkie-talkie and started laughing arrogantly. To the pursuing troops of Fortress 178, my advice to you all is to surrender quickly. You're clearly surrounded by us, so what are you trying to bluff? But just as he finished speaking, he was greeted by a hail of bullets from behind. The regimental commander was so frightened that his hands trembled again. Zhang Xiaoman's voice came from over the radio, "My advice to you is to keep driving. We don't know if anything will happen to us, but if you dare stop, you all will definitely be the first to suffer." The Zong Consortium's regimental commander nearly started shedding tears of humiliation again. He swore into the walkie-talkie and said that the razor-sharp company would definitely pay the price, and that the Zong Consortium's troops behind them would never let him off. On the razor-sharp company's side, Zhao Shaochen sat in the back of a truck and wondered, "Wait a minute, even though we're in range of the tank behind us, why didn't they open fire at us? Furthermore, the Zong Consortium's armored brigade is way too quiet back there." Zhang Xiaoman said unhappily, "Something must be wrong with them. Why else would we have gotten forced into taking cover in the gully twice without being attacked? I think they should have discovered us back then, but I wonder why they didn't open fire on us." At that, Ren Xiaosu widened his eyes. "Tell me, what happened?" Zhao Shaochen related the incident and said curiously, "I feel that something strange is going on." A conjecture popped into Ren Xiaosu's mind. He ordered, "Turn, let's not follow these defeated Zong Consortium troops anymore. The armored brigade behind us probably isn't here to attack us but to chase after the Zong Consortium's troops in front of us." Then the Zong Consortium's troops in front saw the razor-sharp company turning into the wilderness through their rearview mirrors. The regimental commander immediately felt a sense of relief. He had been saved, but after being chased around like a dog for so long, how could he just let the matter rest? The regiment commander shouted to his soldiers, "They've been intimidated by us, but we can't just let them escape like that." After the razor-sharp company departed, the Zong Consortium troops were the only ones left in front of the armored brigade. With a loud boom, the armored brigade's tank to their rear opened fire. The Zong Consortium's regimental commander was stunned. He could only watch helplessly as the truck at the back of his convoy suddenly turned into a fireball. "What's going on?" The soldiers started crying. "Regimental commander, the armored brigade is here to attack us." Chapter 466 Total Strength, 184, Present Strength, 183. The other day, when Li Shenton hypnotized the armored brigade, he had ordered that they could only kill the Zong Consortium soldiers and not the innocent. Li Shenton's hypnotism could be called magical and was different from Zong Cheng's superpower that allowed him to turn a person into an obedient machine. Li Shenton's power allowed him to insert specific commands into a person's subconsciousness. The targets hypnotized by Li Shenton would even have the ability to think on their own. To put it simply, they could distinguish between who the Zong Consortium soldiers were and who were not. Although Ren Xiaosu and the razor-sharp company were also driving the Zong Consortium's vehicles, they were dressed in refugee clothing. Therefore, even though the armored brigade was chasing after the Zong Consortium troops from behind, they could not indiscriminately kill the innocent razor-sharp company that was blocking their way. But once the razor-sharp company departed from the chase, the armored brigade immediately started firing at the Zong Consortium troops. How could a group of routed soldiers stand up to a full armored brigade? Or rather, the strongest defensive unit that remained across the Zong Consortium's strongholds in the entire northwest right now was Stronghold 146's Garrison Brigade, with the rest of the Zong Consortium troops still involved in the battle at the front lines. Therefore, the 131st Brigade did not have any worthy opponents in the rear. The soldiers of the 131st Brigade were sitting quietly in the armored vehicles. As they had not rested for a long time, dark circles were appearing under their eyes. But they could not sleep, at least not until the moment they were finally at death's door. The razor-sharp company watched as the armored brigade drove off, then turned to look at Ren Xiaosu. "What's happening?" Ren Xiaosu thought for a while. "I think someone called Li Shenton might be controlling them." Ren Xiaosu did not have any actual proof of that, though. Even though their razor-sharp company was clearly within range of the armored brigade, they did not get fired upon. Ren Xiaosu just felt that something was off. It was just his intuition. Thinking of what he had witnessed back at the Lee Consortium's stronghold, the people who were hypnotized by Lee Shenton would basically push themselves to their limits as though they had gone crazy, so this armored brigade would probably not last much longer either. Seeing that the armored brigade was heading straight for the next stronghold, Ren Xiaosu thought that Li Shenton might have just done Fortress 178 a huge favor. Or was Li Shenton's intention actually to help Ren Xiaosu? But no matter what, this armored brigade would definitely bring a great surprise to the Zong Consortium. Ren Xiaosu asked, "How's the war going for Commander Zhang and the others in the south?" "It's still going well, but the Zong Consortium is putting up quite a resistance on the battlefront. Although we'll definitely win, there'll have to be some sacrifices on our side as well." Zhang Xiaoman sighed. "Besides, Xiaosu, the Zong Consortium will definitely plunge into chaos now that you've killed more than half of their higher-ups," Zhao Xiaochen said. When Ren Xiaosu heard that Fortress 178 could win the war, he felt more at ease. However, the deputy commander who had been captured by them said, that might not be the case. Zong Ying is the frontline commander of the Zong forces, so he's still pretty well respected by the military. Besides, he's been expanding his influence in recent years too. Because of that, the Zong higher-ups have kept him in check for the past 3 years. Now that the Zong higher-ups are no longer in control, who knows? He might just take the opportunity to consolidate the Zong Consortium and become the new. "That won't do. I'll have to inform the commander about this," interrupted Zhang Xiaoman. Then he dialed a number on the satellite phone and repeated the deputy commander's words to Wang Fengyuan. However, Wang Fengyuan said, "Don't worry, Zong Ying won't survive beyond tonight." After saying that, Wang Fengyuan hung up. Zhang Xiaoman and the others exchanged glances. Ren Xiaosu said, "It seems like Commander Zhang has a plan to deal with him." Truth be told, Fortress 178 did have contingency plans for that. Ever since Su Xianchu ambushed the Zong Consortium troops in the Gobi, those contingency plans started taking effect one after another. For example, there was still quite a few lucky survivors from the Zong Consortium's 3rd Ancillary Branch in Stronghold 146 who were looking to escape, but they were suddenly met by that fortune teller who stopped them from leaving. At the front lines, Zong Ying did not even know danger was approaching. After being in hiding for over a decade, Zhang Jinglan had destroyed the Zong Consortium as soon as he returned to the northwest. From this moment on, Fortress 178 would no longer have any opponents in the northwest. Only the Qing Consortium and Fortress 178 remained in the entire southwest and northwest, which were separated by a river. If anyone else had gone to ask Wang Fengyuan, he would definitely not have revealed anything to them. Only the razor-sharp company could receive such treatment and get some information out of him. Not everyone was capable of destroying Stronghold 146. When the Fortress 178 commanders at the front lines heard that Stronghold 146 in the north had been taken by the razor-sharp company, jealous expressions appeared on their faces. Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company had completed their mission. There was basically nothing left for them to do on the battlefield. The razor-sharp company had already received their orders to march back south to rendezvous with Zhou Yinglong's forward strike battalion where they would reorganize themselves before returning to Fortress 178. Zhang Xiaoman said happily, "We'll definitely earn the Nebula Medal this time since half the Zong higher-ups were killed by our razor-sharp company. We're clearly just a company, yet it feels like we're a brigade instead." "Tui," Zhao Xiaochen scolded jokingly, "you're such a shameless captain. What we achieved was obviously all Ren Xiaosu's credit. What has it got anything to do with you? Without Ren Xiaosu, we might not even have survived to now." "But Ren Xiaosu is also part of our razor-sharp company," Zhang Xiaoman said unhappily, "we're in the same unit, understand?" As the exhausted soldiers of the razor-sharp company sat in the vehicle, they felt a sense of relief. Everyone knew the war in the northwest was finally coming to an end. The remaining battles had nothing to do with them. But when everyone thought back on the details, it seemed like it was just as Zhao Xiaochen had described. If Ren Xiaosu were not around in this war, they would probably have died long ago. They had captured Mount Donghua and Mt. Guan, attacked the Beiwen River to distract the enemy's firepower from the main forces, crossed the river at Mount Chang went into the Zong Consortium's territory, took out the logistic lines of Stronghold 144, wrecked their military factories, and eventually destroyed Stronghold 146 entirely. It was no wonder the commanders at the front lines felt a little jealous. Although the razor-sharp company did not really engage in any tough battles, they had done more than what most of the other fighting forces had contributed, and all of this was even achieved with only 184 of them. Someone sneaked a glance at Ren Xiaosu, who was sitting in the vehicle. After this war, there would probably be no one who would not be convinced by Ren Xiaosu, right? Of course, Ren Xiaosu was still far from being qualified as the fortress commander, since knowing how to fight and being an able commander were two different matters. But there was still plenty of time in the future. Everyone felt that this young man would grow up to be like Zhang Jinglan and become the backbone of Fortress 178 someday. Ren Xiaosu, meanwhile, quietly leaned back in his seat and watched the dust and smoke get swept up by the strong wind in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking right now. When the troops were about to arrive at the rendezvous point, it was already evening. Zhou Yinglong had been waiting at the entrance of the camp for a long time. Not only Zhou Yinglong, but Wang Fengyuan, Zhang Jinglan, and the other important commanders were here as well. The rendezvous point was the northern headquarters of Fortress 178. After Zhang Xiaoman and the razor-sharp company jumped out of the vehicles and limped, Zhou Yinglong kicked him and said, "Why are you pretending to be injured when you're not?" Zhang Xiaoman quickly stood to attention and said with a cheeky smile, "It makes us appear even more valiant, no?" As they spoke, the razor-sharp company assembled behind Zhang Xiaoman. Zhang Xiaoman shouted, "Count off. 1. 2. 182. Throughout the counting off, the voices of the razor-sharp company's soldiers were sonorous. However, the count-off ended at 182. Zhang Xiaoman thought that something was not right. Why are we short one person? There should be 184 of them in total, including Zhang Xiaoman himself. But why was one of them missing? Zhao Xiaochen wondered, "Hey, wait a minute, where's Ren Xiaosu?" "That's right, where's Ren Xiaosu?" Zhang Jinglan stood calmly in front of the formation. Many of the commanders had only stayed behind because they wanted to see what that legendary Ren Xiaosu looked like. But in the end, Ren Xiaosu had disappeared. Zhou Yinglong looked at Zhang Xiaoman. "What's wrong with you? How could you lose Ren Xiaosu?" Zhang Xiaoman was also starting to get anxious. "Did any of you see Ren Xiaosu just now?" "Yes, he was still around a moment ago. He was just sitting there in the bed of the truck. I dunno where he suddenly disappeared to." "Yeah, I saw him as well." Zhang Jinglan sighed. "Never mind, leave him be." Zhang Jinglan knew that Ren Xiaosu had temporarily joined Fortress 178 because of the Zong Consortium. But it was also because of the destruction of the Zong Consortium that he had left again. His heart did not belong here, after all. Wang Fengyuan whispered, could he really have felt estranged? Zhang Jinglan shook his head and said, "It's not important." Then Zhang Jinglan looked at Zhang Xiaoman and said, "Carry on." Zhang Xiaoman stood to attention and swung his hand up energetically close to his ear in a salute. "Reporting in, Commander, the razor-sharp company has assembled. ... Zhang Xiaoman was full of pride when he spoke. But now that the razor-sharp company was short one person, he somehow felt very empty and miserable inside. Ren Xiaosu actually left without bidding farewell. Thinking back on the times they spent together for the past month or so, the difficulties and dangers they faced were deeply imprinted in their minds. As he kept speaking, Zhang Xiaoman grew depressed. Zhou Yinglong snapped at him, "Haven't we already won the war? So what's with that expression of yours?" "Battalion Commander, sir, we had made an agreement that no man would get left behind, but we've failed to bring Ren Xiaosu back with us." Everyone suddenly fell silent. No one had ever expected that the entire razor-sharp company would truly survive the war. Chapter 467 Zong Cheng's Death. As the Zong Consortium's battle continued in the north, an off-road vehicle was speeding towards the central plains. The sky was vast and blue while the ground stretched endlessly into the horizon. As the vehicle drove on, it resembled a comet shooting across the sky with an exhaust trail. It was as though getting here made it feel like the troubles of the war were cast far away. But instead of taking the main road, this vehicle suddenly made a detour at some point and drove into the extensive mountain range. The young man deliberately parked the off-road vehicle in an extremely remote place and got out. He took out all of his belongings before pushing them over into a ravine. He probably did this so no one would discover his whereabouts. This young man was extremely careful and took so many precautions to hide his tracks. In fact, to avoid whatever he was trying to avoid, he even planned to trek across the treacherous mountain range. The young man wore a backpack. The water and food he had inside were enough for him to trek all the way to the central plains on foot. Suddenly, this young man turned his head and looked at his homeland with a hint of nostalgia and hatred on his face. He promised himself that he would return someday. But when he turned back around, someone on a small hill in the mountain range ahead smiled at him and said, "What are you looking at?" The young man was shocked. He turned around and drew a pistol from his waist, ready to shoot. He reacted like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. But as he turned around, the man sitting on the hill chuckled and snapped his fingers. Then the young man's face turned blank. "Let's play a game," Li Shenton said with a smile. "The game is called 20 Questions. So, what's your name?" "Zongcheng, Zongxiang," the young man answered. Li Shenton was stunned. "Why do you have two names? Besides, Zongcheng doesn't look like you." "I used to be called Zongxiang, but now I'm known as Zongcheng," the young man answered. "I planted a seed within Zongxiang with my superpower and turned him into a puppet." Li Shenton was a little surprised. Even he did not expect that Zongcheng would possess such a power. Thinking about it, wouldn't this mean that Zongcheng would be as good as immortal as long as he planted a part of his consciousness in others? Furthermore, the Zong Consortium's members had probably not realized this was something that could be done. Within the Zong Consortium, both Zongcheng and Zongxiang could be considered competitors. Since there could only be one patriarch of the organization, there would have to be clearly defined winners and losers. Both Zongcheng and Zongxiang were from the main branch of the family. Previously, some people from the third and fourth ancillary branches tried to sow discord between them, but little did they know that Zongcheng had put Zongxiang under his control a long time ago. Moreover, Zongxiang continued living in the Zong Consortium like a normal person, so no one discovered that something like that could have happened. This power was way too strange. If the other organization's leaders were to also fall under Zongcheng's control, wouldn't it be extremely easy for him to bring them down? Although Zongcheng could only control a small number of people, Li Shenton had not expected this power could actually get branched into a different power. Li Shenton asked, "Do you have any other seeds out there? Is it the same for everyone you gain control over?" "No," Zongxiang said, "the seeds are extremely rare. Only by controlling a fixed group of people for an extended time can I draw on their mental strength to create the seeds. There was supposed to be another seed out there, but I didn't have the chance to use it." "That's good," Li Shenton said with a smile. "It's such a disgrace that I have a similar power as someone like you." At this point, a flash of anger and struggle appeared on Zongxiang's face. It was as though he was trying to break free from Li Shenton's control. But before he could really react, his consciousness was once again suppressed by Li Shenton. Li Shenton's superpower seemed to be a natural nemesis against other mind-controlling supernatural beings such as Zongcheng. Li Shenton posed a few more questions to him regarding the Zong Consortium's war efforts and found out that the Zong Consortium was plagued by multiple crises and could no longer resist Fortress 178. He also found out about how the 131st Brigade had gone back to Stronghold 146 and caused a huge ruckus there. Li Shenton said with a helpless smile, "To think that rather than helping, I nearly got in his way instead. But what happened sounds quite interesting." To someone like Li Shenton, interesting things had become something he looked forward to in life. "All right," Li Shenton thought for a moment and said, "That's it for my questioning. You can end your life now." When he said that, Zongxiang's expression suddenly distorted. It seemed like there was a constant struggle between unacceptance and anger within him. Li Shenton sighed and said, "It seems that I'm still not strong enough to make a supernatural being choose between life and death." Then Li Shenton picked up a stone and flicked it between Zongxiang's eyes. Only at this time could Zongcheng be considered truly dead. Off to the side, Liren looked at Zongxiang's corpse, used to seeing things like this. Big Brother Shenton, where do we go now? To Fortress 178. No, Li Shenton shook his head and said, I think Ren Xiaosu will probably leave the Fortress 178 troops very soon. That's not where he wants to be, at least not for now. Then where are we going? We should go and do something more interesting, Li Shenton said with a smile. He looked at the case on Liren's back and teased, when they said you were a carrying pole back then, I didn't believe it at first. Liren wrinkled her nose. I'm not a carrying pole. Stop calling me that. Sure, little carrying pole. Li Shenton turned around and headed off in the direction of the Central Plains. Hu Shuo was nowhere to be seen, and no one knew where he had gone. The war in the north continued. Zhong Ying, the commander at the front lines, immediately summoned all of the Zong Consortium's generals at the battlefront to a meeting after receiving news that Stronghold 146 was in trouble. But the moment the generals stepped into the headquarters, they were immediately arrested. Then Zhong Ying arranged for his trusted aide to carry out the consolidation process. Of the generals here, Zhong Ying had the most troops under him. The other generals had not expected Zhong Ying to be so ruthless and decisive to arrest them immediately after trouble broke out back at Stronghold 146. Zhong Ying said to them, the Zong Consortium is currently facing a crisis, so we need to be united. What he meant by united was that they should submit to Zhong Ying and let him lead them. And since everyone was arrested, they could not refuse his proposal to unite together. The Zong Consortium's generals looked at one another. They were not expecting Zhong Ying to immediately bare his fangs now that the majority of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups had been taken out or injured. But one of the generals could not understand. We've already been defeated in the war. Even if you control all of the frontline troops now, you still can't win against Fortress 178, isn't that so? We'll head north, Zhong Ying said. We have to continue marching north of Stronghold 146. This place isn't safe anymore. We can rebuild when we get farther north and wait for our chance to make a comeback. The generals were taken aback. Was Zhong Ying planning on bringing everyone to the northern steppe? Were they supposed to completely abandon everything they currently had? Not only that, Zhong Ying was even planning to take these frontline troops on a pillaging expedition as they made their way north. They would take whatever valuable items from the Zong Consortium's strongholds and turn them into ruins. As for what would happen to the stronghold residents after that, it was something for Fortress 178 to consider. Someone asked, how should we shake off the pursuit from the Fortress 178 troops? I'll have Zongxing to help me deal with them, of course. If we head another 170 kilometers north, we'll arrive at Fuji Bridge. After we cross it, we can blow up the bridge. Since it will take several days for Fortress 178 to build a pontoon bridge, there will be enough time for us to make our retreat, Zhong Ying explained. Zongxing was one of the few veteran generals left in the Zong Consortium. When everyone started to withdraw from the front lines, Zongxing still held his ground and fought for every inch of territory. Normally, neither the younger generals nor the veteran generals were too fond of each other. The veterans always felt that the young ones did not feel a sense of belonging to the clan. But what Zhong Ying uttered here decided the fate of Zongxing. Zhong Ying looked at the Zong Consortium's generals and said with a smile, there will always be a need for sacrifices in war. Of course, what I mean is the sacrifice of others. Chapter 468 Zhong Ying's death. The Zong Consortium troops at Mount Wuchuan was suddenly withdrawn, and only one unit was left behind to put up a stubborn resistance at the most dangerous position on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the rest of the troops started plundering through their own territory. The Zong Consortium strongholds in the north were being looted by their own forces. On the same evening, Zhong Ying's troops arrived at Fuji Bridge. As he stood on the bridge and watched the transport vehicles passing by, he suddenly sighed and said to his second-in-command next to him, I wonder when we can return after going north this time. Remember, bring along the refugee fishermen from the various strongholds, as well as those who specialize in animal husbandry. In reality, Zhong Ying had already been scheming to retreat north for some time. He had not expected things to go so smoothly and that someone would actually give him a hand in getting rid of the majority of the Zong Consortium's higher-ups. The northern steppe was situated outside of the stronghold perimeter. It was a place where wild beasts ran rampant. But what threat could those wild beasts possibly pose to professional soldiers? His second-in-command said, "A lot of our troops have deserted over the past few days, but they've all been caught and killed." "Well, it's very normal that some people try to escape," Zhong Ying said with a smile. "In their opinion, they would rather become refugees than go north to herd sheep. Don't worry, killing a few people and streamlining our troops as we make our way there isn't exactly a bad thing, and we can make use of it to intimidate the other soldiers as well. After all, it'll be a tough life from now on." For now, Zhong Ying wanted to use an extreme form of coercion to band these routed Zong Consortium troops together and bring them north. These troops would be his investment. They wouldn't even need an armored brigade once they get to the northern steppe. After all, mechanized troops would be useless without fuel. His second-in-command asked, "Commander, when can we return here?" "We'll return when Fortress 178 and the King Consortium start fighting." Zhong Ying laughed and said, "No two tigers can share the same mountain, so there'll definitely come such a day. How can King Zhen possibly give up on the lucrative north when he's such an ambitious person? Let's go, we'll just wait and see." In truth, Zhong Ying did not know whether he could return here. Even if Fortress 178 and the King Consortium started fighting, the Zong Consortium would not have the strength to re-enter the stage. They would only be able to watch others perform on the stage while waiting in the wings. But politics was always a mixture of truth and lies. Even if Zhong Ying did not have any intention of returning, he could not tell his soldiers. Only by giving these people a glimmer of hope would he be allowed the time to consolidate his power. All of a sudden, a water arrow shot out from the river under the bridge. Zhong Ying was utterly shocked when he sensed danger. No one expected such a surprising turn of events to happen here. This was an attack by a supernatural being. Zhong Ying quickly pulled his second-in-command in front of him to block the water arrow attack. But when the water arrow was about to hit, it suddenly lost shape and transformed into many fine water needles. Zhong Ying hid his entire body behind his second-in-command. In that instant, his second-in-command was riddled by the needles. The nearby supernatural being who was responsible for protecting Zhong Ying finally reacted and spat a cloudy mist. The cloudy mist transformed into a majestic hawk in the air and hovered over Zhong Ying's head, ready to protect him at all times. But before Zhong Ying could breathe a sigh of relief, a huge, translucent killer whale jumped out of the turbulent river and leaped over the bridge. The killer whale was formed from water. As it leaped over everyone's heads and landed back into the river, it caught the hawk in midair and dragged it down into the water. The supernatural being next to Zhong Ying coughed up blood and collapsed to the ground with a depressed look. However, the attack did not stop there. Suddenly, some dark clouds started gathering in the sky and snowflakes began falling. The falling snowflakes were as sharp as blades, and they quickly pierced through Zhong Ying's chest before disintegrating into nothingness. Zhong Ying fell to the ground. This ambitious general of the Zong Consortium failed to realize his ambitions in the end. But there was nothing much to feel indignant about before he died. The supernatural attack he witnessed here today was obviously not done by a single person. Several supernatural beings had worked together to ensure he was killed. And the variation of attacks in the water clearly told Zhong Ying that his successful destruction of the pontoon bridge at Blackstone River that day was just a deception to trick him into thinking that Fortress 178 was out of retreating options, and it was not that they could do nothing about those speedboats he sent. Before Zhong Ying died, he gave a mental sigh. The old era was over, after all. After being briefed, Wang Fengyuan looked at Zhang Jinglan and said, "Commander, Zhong Ying is dead." Just as you had expected, they were intending to leave via Fuji Bridge. Commander's foresight is amazing. Zhang Jinglan said with a smile, "So you've also learned how to flatter others, huh? If their intentions were to shake us off, that was the only route they could have taken. This isn't about having amazing foresight. Everyone thought Fortress 178 did not really have any supernatural beings in their service, but that was not the case at all. In Wang Fengyuan's words, their superpowers came from being frozen. The soldiers had suffered daily hardships at the border outposts. In winter, their breaths would even condense into ice when they exhaled. That freezing and harsh environment hammered out their strongest willpower. But it was not enough to just freeze. They also had to possess the most sincere belief in the world. Did the soldiers choose to be in such a harsh environment for themselves? Of course not. Was it for meritorious service and promotion? It was not that either. They did it because they wanted to protect the stronghold. Therefore, belief and hardship were indispensable factors for the awakening of their superpowers. Yang Shaojun had once said to Ren Xiaosu, when a disaster comes, mental strength becomes the highest caliber of weapon humanity has in the face of danger. While wild animals evolved to become stronger, and plants turned more bizarre, what was it that humans had? Evolution of mental strength was the proper path for humans to embark on. But of course, it didn't mean that everyone would become supernatural beings just because they had suffered hardships. The secret force in Fortress 178 that was made up of supernatural beings was also another secret that Wang Fengyuan kept. Wang Fengyuan continued, "Commander, the frontline troops have captured a supernatural being. He's the one that can locate other supernatural beings. According to him, he found an opportunity to escape after the 131st Brigade defected. He intended to return to the front line at Mount Wuchuan, but he got captured by us instead." Oh, Zhang Jinggelin's interest was piqued. "Bring him in." Then the supernatural being was pushed into the headquarters by several people outside. It was a plump young man, and he was shouting, "I can help you guys locate other supernatural beings. After you find them, you can round them up and place them under your control. I'm very useful, so don't kill me." Zhang Jinggelin asked him with great interest, "What is your effective detection range?" "I can locate any supernatural being within the radius of 100 kilometers. The delicate-looking supernatural being shouted, "There must be more supernatural beings hidden in Fortress 178. I can help you to find them." Chapter 469 Alliance. Zhang Jinggelin looked at the supernatural being in front of him and said with a smile, "Do you have any other superpowers? What's your name?" "My name is Zun Yeyu," the fair-skinned fatty said, "and no, I don't have any other powers." Zhang Jinggelin nodded and said to Wang Fengyuan, "Bring him to Fortress 178 and see if we can locate any other supernatural beings living there. However, there's no need to force them to join us. Just record their powers in a register." Zun Yeyu's eyes widened. "You're only registering them. Aren't you going to place them under your control so they'll work for you? Our Fortress 178 does not need to resort to restricting the freedom of others in exchange for their strength." Zhang Jinggelin said with a smile, "Have a nice stay in Fortress 178, and don't get yourself involved in the war anymore." Then Zhang Jinggelin had someone take Zun Yeyu away. The Zong Consortium had completely lost control of their strongholds in the north. Actually, Zhang Jinggelin knew that Zong Ying would withdraw from the front line, but he did not try to stop him. If those troops put up a fierce resistance at Mount Wuchuan, it would only serve to increase the casualties that Fortress 178 suffered. Furthermore, since Zong Ying had taken the initiative to pull out of the battlefield with his troops, would the remaining generals who harbored their own plans be able to organize an effective resistance the moment Zong Ying died? Some of them would simply occupy a stronghold in hopes they could become the overseer. But once the Fortress 178 army arrived, these people would immediately lose will and surrender the stronghold. Everything they did was futile in the face of overwhelming strength. Fortress 178 had already deployed an extremely professional team to handle the takeover of the strongholds. This unit had a very clear purpose and operated meticulously. They would forcefully clean up the old ruling hierarchy in the strongholds by killing them. This directive had been established long ago as Fortress 178 did not have time to deal with such pests courteously. At this moment, Wang Shengji's organization sent another delegation to discuss the matter of opening up the transportation lifeline with Fortress 178. Previously, they did not have an in-depth discussion about it because Zhang Jinggelin had yet to conquer the entire northwest. The consortium Wang Shengji belonged to was extremely influential and powerful in the Central Plains, and they formed a triumvirate with two other consortiums. The remaining consortiums in the region simply served to accentuate the big three, or perhaps, just had no ambitions to expand further. Therefore, Wang Shengji previously stated to Zhang Jinggelin that both sides would get the demands. Fortress 178 wanted the resources of the Central Plains, while the Central Plains was eyeing the resources that Fortress 178 had. However, the Wang clan would only deal with whoever was fully in control of the Northwest. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. Although Wang Shengji had rushed to make the trip to the Northwest, it did not mean he would bend his principles to reach a deal. Now that Zhang Jinglan had become the ruler of the Northlands, they could finally start discussing all kinds of deals. However, Zhang Jinglan simply smiled and expressed that he was not qualified to be the ruler of the Northlands. How could a frail scholar be worthy of such a title? But someday, a new ruler would surely appear in the Northwest, and that was something that even he was eagerly awaiting. The representatives of the Wang clan were a little surprised. Why did the words, "a new ruler would surely appear someday," sound like what the ancient tribes would say? And it even carried a hint of feudal superstition too. Zhang Jinglan said with a smile, "That was what our great hoodwinker claimed, but I believe that person will definitely return someday." There were only a few key points brought up in the discussion. They first talked about the minerals and resources Wang Shengji needed, then discussed how to set the prices and what resources would be exchanged between the two sides, as well as how to collect the tariffs. Then they proceeded to talk about how to build the controlled access highway to link up the Northwest and the Central Plains and how it would be managed. Wang Shengji's intention was that they would take charge of restoring all the accessways, whether it was the railway or the highway. However, Zhang Jinglan rejected Wang Shengji's goodwill and expressed that the Northwestern people should resolve the issues in the Northwest by themselves. The Northwestern people would restore the Northwestern accessways, while the Central Plains people would repair the Central Plains portion. That way, neither party would be on the losing side. Third, Wang Shengji proposed they send troops to expel the wild beasts in the vicinity of the trading routes so as not to affect the safety. However, that offer was also turned down by Zhang Jinglan. Seeing that they were planning to construct a railway that led to the Central Plains from the northwest, the commanders of the fighting forces of Fortress 178 did not know whether it was a good thing or not. But in the end, Zhang Jinglan still felt it would not be feasible for them to remain content with staying here in the corner of the northwest for the long term. If they had to face the enemies further northwest, they would have to obtain the resources they were lacking to progress. What surprised Zhang Jinglan was that Wang Shengyan, the younger sister of Wang Shengji, was still part of the delegation this time. Wang Shengyan was also a little fatigued after having to travel back here again from the Central Plains. But when she arrived at the headquarters of Fortress 178, she pretended to casually ask about Ren Xiaosu's whereabouts. She asked why she had not seen Ren Xiaosu around, and if he was injured or had been killed in action. It was only then that she learned of all the things Ren Xiaosu had done in the north, including his departure from Fortress 178 without farewell. Even the people of Fortress 178 did not know where Ren Xiaosu had gone. Wang Shengyan appeared a little crestfallen at this. At the same time the visitors from the Wang clan were here. Luo Lan represented the King Consortium and also dropped by the Northlands. He was here to discuss an alliance between them and Fortress 178. Luo Lan's offer was clear: both sides would get along as friendly neighbors and not interfere with each other's affairs, as well as cooperate with each other to guard against the Central Plains. In other words, he regarded the Central Plains as potential enemies and wanted to prevent them from plotting against the southwest and northwest. Of course, there were also disagreements about this among the commanders of Fortress 178. The King Consortium is overly ambitious. They can't afford to deal with us yet as they are currently busy taking over the Li Consortium and Yang Consortium's strongholds. If we get along peacefully with them now, what'll happen when they start a war with us in the future? That's right. I heard that the experimentals in the south are giving them a headache. After the King Consortium's main forces captured the front line at Ziyang, they immediately turned around and headed back south. This shows that the King Consortium does not have the capacity to deal with us for now. That's why they're suggesting that we get along peacefully. Zhang Jinglan glanced at them and said, "I've already made up my mind to sign an alliance treaty with the King Consortium. However, there's one condition we must reject. We cannot allow the King Consortium to build their railway to connect with ours." Wang Fengyuan said in a low voice, "Commander, the concerns everyone's brought up are valid too." Zhang Jinglan sighed and said, "If another war breaks out at this time, wouldn't our situation be the exact same to what the King Consortium is going through? If we start warring again, the King Consortium's main forces will immediately be deployed here to the north. Then the south will truly become a paradise for the experimentals. If that happens, who knows how many people will have to die. Wang Fengyuan understood what Zhang Jinglan meant. He intended to let the King Consortium focus on dealing with the threat of the experimentals first. That was the most crucial matter for now. What else does that fatty Luo want? Zhang Jinglan asked. He's also looking for Ren Xiaosu. Wang Fengyuan said, I told him that Ren Xiaosu has already left our territory. Nearby, one of the generals muttered, why are all of them looking for Ren Xiaosu? This is so odd. Half a month later, the razor-sharp company was the first of the troops to return to Fortress 178. When they entered the fortress, the residents lined the streets to welcome them back. Someone held up a red banner that read, Welcome home, war heroes. Zhang Xiaoman wore the Nebula Medal on his chest. This award was the highest honor he could receive in Fortress 178. There was a joyous atmosphere on both sides of the street as children followed behind the military transport trucks. A middle-aged woman stuffed whole baskets of eggs into their vehicles, while Lu Yao, the goddess of the fortress, organized a concert put on by the cultural troupe for these victorious warriors. When Lu Yao saw them, she also asked, which one of you is Ren Xiaosu? However, Zhang Xiaoman and the others were at a loss for words. Looking at the cheering crowd in the fortress, Zhang Xiaoman really wished Ren Xiaosu could be here to enjoy this honor with them. They were only given this honor because of Ren Xiaosu. Zhang Xiaoman had another Nebula Medal in his possession that belonged to Ren Xiaosu. For now, it would be placed with him for safekeeping. Zhang Xiaoman somehow felt that the young man would return someday. At that time, he would personally help Ren Xiaosu wear the Nebula Medal. End of volume, Ruler of the Northlands. Next volume, Alliance of Assassins. Chapter 470 The Anjing House. Stronghold 73 was located at the intersection of three rivers in the south of the Central Plains, but come every summer, the blazing hot sun in the sky would vaporize the water in the river. When the seasonal plum rain, passed over the middle and lower reaches of the river, the high atmospheric pressure system would affect airflow in the lower altitudes and inhibit rain clouds from forming, leading to summer droughts as the surface temperatures reached extreme highs. As such, Stronghold 73 was also known as the Furnace. In an official residence on the north side of Longyang Avenue, some people were arguing endlessly in a clan meeting that was in progress. More than a dozen luxury cars were parked in the square outside the official residence. The chauffeurs were standing in a corner smoking and chatting as they waited for the big shots to come out. Inside the conference room, someone said in a loud voice, the Wang clan in the north has already opened up the trade route with the northwest. If we let them carry on developing, wouldn't that make us sitting ducks? Someone retorted, don't always be spoiling for a fight. Our priority now should be to continue our spread east. The Qinghe group over there cannot be underestimated. The person who made the retort was a bearded, middle-aged man. He had a calm look on his face, and his black tie and dark blue military uniform made him appear exceptionally solemn. The person who spoke earlier sneered, Zhou Shiji, the Qinghe group is content with exercising sovereignty within their own territory and has never gotten involved in any competition for resources in the Central Plains. What's there to be afraid of? I don't think you realize yet who our true enemy is. It's not that I deem the Qinghe group to be an enemy, but I've heard that they've mastered how to create superhumans. My opinion's that we should get our hands on a similar method first. The bearded, middle-aged man adjusted the pen and paper in front of him and placed them neatly together. But they don't seem to have that many superhumans in their organization, someone else countered. In this current climate, it's time that we start paying more attention to superhumans. Internal strife was playing out between the main and conservative factions of the clan, but this meeting was destined to have no outcome. It took another 2 hours before these Zhou Consortium big shots finally walked out of the official residence. One by one, the important figures from the conservative faction bid farewell to the representative of their faction, Zhou Shiji. There was even someone who invited him for drinks, but he turned them down. As Zhou Shiji walked down the gravel road in front of the official residence, the protocol officers and security personnel were waiting in front of the car. After the protocol officer opened the car door for Zhou Shiji nodded at him before getting into the car. The luxury black car drove out of the official residence with 2 motorcycle escorts in front and behind. The assistant officer sitting in the front passenger seat held a document and said, the people who met up with the Qinghe group have returned. They said the other party rejected our proposal as usual. Zhou Shiji was resting with his eyes closed and his expression showed no signs of being affected. Someone was watching the movement of the convoy with a pair of military binoculars on a roof of a tall building in the distance. When the person was sure of it, he turned around and brought out 3 white doves from a cage behind him and tossed them into the sky. The sound of the white doves' flapping wings would make anyone joyful. Elsewhere, someone was cautiously hiding in a residence and watching that tall building. When he saw 3 doves taking flight from the tall building, he said to his 3 armed companions next to him, "The target is taking the route that was briefed to us. Get ready to fight. This assassination attempt can only succeed. Failure is unacceptable. Do you think we'll get the chance to join the Anjing House after we pull off this job?" Based on what they said, the Anjing House sounded like an organization rather than a temple. After all, it didn't make sense that one would only be able to join a temple after killing people. But at this moment, a young man suddenly walked out from the shadows next to them. He let out a foul breath and said with a grin, "I've finally found y'all. However, the Anjing House is not a place that characters like you can join." These 4 hitmen quickly pointed the guns at the young man. "Where'd you pop out of? Were you hiding in the kitchen all this while?" Holding a glass of juice in his hand, the young man chuckled softly and said, "Don't get so anxious. Let me finish my juice first." As he spoke, the 4 hitmen's gun barrels twisted like a pastry twist. 5 minutes later, the young man walked out of the building. There was a bright scarlet stain on his white shirt that indicated the fate of the 4 hitmen in the building. He frowned at the sight of the bloodstain, then reached up to wipe it clean. When the stronghold bell rang out in the distance, the white doves in Ping'an Square got alarmed by the sound and took off into the sky. Then the young man took out a paper crane from his pocket and wrote on it, "Mission accomplished. Please deposit the commission into my account. The targets are extras that don't know who the mastermind is." After the message was written, the paper crane took flight into the sky by itself and crossed the turbulent river, going north. This paper crane would help to bring back news of what had happened here. As it flew among the white doves, it did not look out of place at all. As for where the paper crane would fly to, the young man did not know either. On a mountain road in the north, a young man was trekking across the treacherous mountains. He was moving down the river, apparently searching for something along the way. But at the same time, he seemed afraid he would miss something. The mountains here were yellowish-brown, and only after heading further east did the landscape start transforming into a grassy green. The young man looked a little disappointed when he did not find any tracks here. But it was also a good thing that he did not see any corpses, since that would mean the people he was looking for might still be alive. He walked and walked until half a month had passed. Actually, he could probably have crossed the mountain range within 4 or 5 days if he had traveled at full speed. But as he was searching for tracks along the way, it delayed his travels by quite a bit. The young man slowed when he heard a ruckus up ahead. Before he could walk much further, he saw a group of refugee workers in safety helmets cutting wood. When these workers saw the young man, they were stunned. "Friend, where did you come from? Why did you walk out of the mountain range?" "Actually, I lost my way and got here by accident. I'm from the northwest," the young man said with a smile. "Bros, where are y'all from?" "We're lumberjack refugees from Stronghold 61. The oldest lumberjack wondered. "The northwest. A lot of people fleeing there have arrived here recently. I heard that there's a war going on. Did you escape from the war?" Quote, "Yes." The young man smiled and said, "I escaped here to get away from the war. The fighting there is too deadly. Oh, I heard that the superhumans over there are extremely powerful. Someone escaped from Stronghold 146 and is staying in our town. They claimed that Stronghold 146 was destroyed by a young superhuman. Are the superhumans these days that fearsome? They can even destroy a stronghold by themselves." The young man was stunned before replying with a smile, "I dunno about that. I haven't been to Stronghold 146 before." "Oh, news doesn't really flow that well over there, so it's understandable that you don't know about it." The lumberjack nodded. "My name is Zhu Yahui. If you're lost, you can come back with us later and settle down in town. But you definitely won't be allowed into the stronghold. Friend, how should I address you?" The young man smiled. "Thank you, Bro, I'm Ren Xiaosu. This concludes the chapters for today. Show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribe.